Recording in progress.
This time we're going to call to order the meeting of December 5th, 2022. Councilmember Sentence, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. A roll call, please.
Councilmember Perez,
Present.
Councilmember Resendez,
Here.
Councilmember Morales,
Here.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Mayor Velasquez.
Here.
Real quick, Mayor, just so you notice, Jennifer's voice is a little deeper than normal.
I did notice that.
She is sick, but she is online, and David and Paul will be running that side of the meeting.
Okay, not a problem. We'll now move, verification of agenda posting.
Thank you. The agenda for the City Council of the City of Hollister regular meeting of December 5th, 2022 was posted on the bulletin board at City Hall on November 30th, 2022 at 1:40 p.m. per Government Code Section 54954.2.
Thank you. We're going to now move to the consent agenda. Are there any items council like to pull?
Mayor Velasquez.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I'd like to pull A1 and A6, please.
Is there any from the public?
No, sir.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll move to item A1. Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a request for a minor correction to the minutes, and it's as it relates to G2, the information report that I provided, and it should be on the packet page 11, and it's on line 7 of the first, or actually the paragraph, and that line begins with storing of boats, recreational vehicles, and cars. I'm going to recommend that cards be amended to cars, please, and that would conclude my request for amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, comments? Any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
Is there a motion?
Move to adopt with the suggested corrections.
The motion, is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. 5-0. We'll move to item A6.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, resolution number 2022-205, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister, authorizing an agreement between the City of Hollister Animal Shelter and the Regents of the University of California on behalf of its Davis Campus School of Veterinary Medicine, on behalf of its Coret Shelter Medicine Program. Staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution authorizing the City Council of the City of Hollister to accept a $5,000 grant from Coret Shelter Medicine Program. You have any questions?
Thank you. Is there any questions, Mr. Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I do have just a handful of questions. So what is it going to cost the city and staff time to actually provide the data? It looks like it's a 5-year window as is listed, but really it's a 10-year window because the initial data was from 2017 to 2021 or through 2021, and then 2022 through 2026. So clearly there's going to be a staff cost to do that work, and so I'd like to know what that is, please.
Hi, Council and Mayor. We've already done the first part, the initial 5-year part. It took us about 5 minutes because our software program has it listed, and all we have to do is enter the dates that they want for the records. So it's not a huge impact on our staff.
And then would it be safe to presume that that would be the case for the second 5 years?
Correct, yes.
And that will be on a yearly basis, not a 5-year time frame?
On a yearly basis for the 5 years.
Okay, well, that's great news. Who's going to actually be doing the data recovery or providing as far as the staff that would be assigned to that? Would it be part of the clerical team?
Yeah, we have a support services assistant who will aid that, who will take care of that for us.
Okay, and Will any of the data provided require any level of redaction?
No, no, it's stuff that's all available to the public on our website as is. So they're just requesting that as well.
Okay, and in the report, it says that if approved, the money will be used for the needs of the shelter. What are those needs?
In some of the examples they had given us, it could be updating the structures of our kennels, things to better and enrich the animals while they're in our care.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your answers. Mayor, that concludes my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any from the public?
We've not received any speaker cards on this item.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. We'll now move to public comment. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speaker cards are available in the lobby and are to be completed and given to the city clerk before speaking. When the city clerk calls your name, please come to the podium. State your name and city for the record and speak to the city council. If you are joining us by Zoom, please click on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you are joining us by Zoom using a cell phone, please press *9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note state law prohibits the city council from discussing or taking any action on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do, Mayor. Julian Torres?
My name is Julian Torres, and I'm an artist and co-founder of a non-profit called Master of Possibilities. And I've worked with San Benito Arts in the past and other nonprofits in the past. But the reason why I'm here today is because I recently painted a mural on my own at my home, like on the garage wall and the fence. But as of today, the police department they issued a warning of code enforcement in violation of presence of graffiti presence of graffiti in violation of the city codes. But the definition of graffiti is unauthorized an inscription, word, figure, mark, or design that is written, marked, etched, scratched, and drawn, sprayed, or painted, and on any building or personal property. But the thing is, we own the house, and I was given permission. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres.
There are no more speaker cards for this section.
Thank you. We'll move to item D1.
Thank you, Mayor. On the mural, or painting, we will review with legal that situation.
Thank you. We'll move to item D2.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. We're going to now move to item E1.
Good evening. Oh. Thank you. Tonight, the City Council will be discussing an amendment to the zoning ordinance related to Senate Bill 9. Senate Bill 9 took effect on January 1st, 2022. The Planning Commission has reviewed this twice, once during a study session on August 4th, and then again during a public hearing where we had a draft ordinance for them to review. Prior to the Planning Commission looking at it for the second time, though, the City Council adopted an ordinance amending the existing zoning ordinance to allow for duplexes in the R1 district, which conforms to the requirements of SB1, so that is already in effect. And then on November 17th, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt the new chapter 17.26, 2-unit residential developments and urban lot splits. The purpose of Senate Bill 9 is to increase density and the variety of housing types available throughout the state of California. SB 9 applies only to single-family residential zone properties, but there are some exceptions. Some of them include if it's an environmentally sensitive area, if there are hazards that cannot be mitigated properly, if it's a historic property or historic district, and then if there were tenants previously located on the property, or if there are rent-controlled units on the property. In those cases, SB 9 would not apply to, would not be valid. So there's two types of developments that are allowed under SB 9. One is 2-unit housing and the other is an urban lot split. So what a 2-unit housing development is that on a property, you can have 2 primary dwelling units. So you can have your house and you can have another house within one primary lot. You can also have if it has not been split before, you can also have an accessory dwelling unit or a junior accessory dwelling unit. An urban lot split is when you take the existing property and split it to create 2 new parcels, and then you can have a total of 4 dwelling units combined within those 2 parcels. So there's just a small example on the screen where you can see kind of the difference of what can happen. You can have 2 attached, you can have 2 detached per lot, but really someone gets to play with how they're going to put the two units on their parcel. For 2-unit housing developments, the city has to review them under Senate Bill 9 ministerially. So there's no discretion that we're allowed to have. The state has exempt them from the California Environmental Quality Act, and the state gives us the minimum setbacks. So they are different from our setbacks for single-family dwellings. So it's a minimum 4-foot interior, so side yard, and a minimum 10-foot rear yard. So those are different from our setbacks for one single-family dwelling. We have to allow for these units. So there are some times when some of the requirements does get waived. If for some reason the existing dwelling has to be demolished in order to allow for this 2-unit development, if the existing dwelling had setbacks that are less than what the state is saying we have to allow those to continue. Again, the units can be attached or detached. They have to provide a minimum of 1 parking space, off-street parking space. And there are a few things that the city can impose if we wanted to. Some of those restrictions include restricting short-term rentals and providing some design standards that are objective that the developer or homeowner would have to follow. For urban lot splits, again, that's taking the existing property and dividing it into 2. The one requirement is that one parcel has to be 40% of the size of the original parcel. So you can't have a very small remnant parcel and a large parcel. The property owner, if they're choosing to do an urban lot split, this is different from the 2-unit residential split, but in this case, they have to occupy one of the units for 3 years. They're only allowed a maximum of 2 dwelling units as we've drafted in the ordinance. So they get 2 existing primary dwelling units when there's a lot split, but they can't add an accessory dwelling unit. And all of the setbacks and requirements for 2-unit residential developments applies to this as well. So what staff is proposing is a new chapter into the zoning ordinance to provide some clear language to lay out what a person needs to do if they wanted to either do a 2-unit residential development or a lot split. The state does not require us to do so, but it is an option to the city, and if we did adopt an ordinance, we can require some additional things that we wouldn't otherwise be allowed to require. So in the ordinance that we've drafted, we've clearly listed what the development standards are for these houses, the setbacks, which are different again, the height, lot coverage. And and we've also included a little section on design standards. And really what that is to ensure that if we're doing a duplex now, if we're having two different dwelling units, that they look similar. So if they have, a wood shingle siding house or a stucco siding house, that addition is going to match the new one. The new one would match the old one, just so you have some design consistency. So we're looking for, consistency in colors, consistency in materials, and roof forms. We, as part of this, have also established application submittal requirements. We've established clear review procedures, so both the city and the applicant would be aware of that. And two things which we are allowed to require, which is not, if we didn't have the ordinance, we wouldn't be able to impose, but one is requiring the affidavit. So if you're doing the lot split, you're gonna say that you are in fact living there for 3 years. And the other is to require a deed restriction for urban lot splits. So that deed restriction would prohibit them from splitting it again in the future, and it would let future property owners know that there is a restriction, that the lot was previously split and you can't split it again. So although not required, the city can choose to implement an ordinance related to SB 9 in order to establish requirements for review and approval. By adopting this ordinance, the city can do a few things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to do, which is to restrict the short-term rental, to require the affidavit and the deed restriction for the urban lot split, and to include the design standards within the ordinance that we can then apply to these developments, These requirements don't conflict with state law, but if we don't have them in our ordinance, we can't impose them. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick ones. How do legally permitted and already established garage conversions have an impact on this, or do they?
So, because there's two different types, so in the ordinance, for example, if you're not splitting your property, we have a section on accessory dwelling units, and we're saying you can have, in addition to your 2 units, you can have 1. So if you have your existing property, your garage is converted to a junior accessory dwelling unit, and then you want to build that second primary dwelling, you can. If you have an existing junior accessory dwelling unit and you're splitting your lot, then you couldn't have it. Those would count as 2 for that one lot, but then remember, you get another 2 on the other lot. So instead of having 4 new, you get 2 new, if that makes sense.
I think so. So again, if I wanted to split a lot and in essence build 4 units, then I couldn't do a garage conversion in addition to, is that correct?
Correct. You get 4 units, 4 lot split. You get
Right.
4 total units between the 2 parcels, so 2 on each. And you get to choose how you want to do it. You could do 2 on one, you could do 2 on the other, or 2 on one and an accessory dwelling and 1 on the other. You kind of get to play with the numbers, but you're capped at 2 for urban lot splits.
Okay. And you were talking about a deed restriction. And is that already part of the existing law, or is that something that this council would need to adopt the ordinance to create the
So
deed
you
restriction
ha-
process?
Correct. So in order for us to impose it, it's an option. It doesn't conflict with the law, but in order for us to impose it and require it as part of their submittal and what they need to do before they can get a building permit, that has to be in the ordinance.
Okay. And what's planning's current practice for these ADUs that are discovered by code enforcement that may be in the permitting process or maybe have been built without the benefit of permits or inspections?
So the state has specific regulations that we have to follow for existing, and we can't require, there's a number of things we can't require, but Eva can probably speak to that one better than I can.
Thank you.
Sure, sorry. So for ADUs, which are different than SB 9 units, and both laws kind of are active at the same time, but for existing ADUs or ADUs that are found by code enforcement or what have you, we are helping people go through the process as long as it's an ADU that can be, or if they had, let's say they had their garage and it wasn't converted and they wanted to build the exact ADU that they have, they could go through the process. So we're helping people go through the process and recording. For ADUs, we record a deed restriction that essentially just says no short-term rentals. They follow the law. And then for JADUs, it requires an owner occupancy. And those are the restrictions that are in the state law anyway for ADUs. SB 9 units, the primary units will be kind of treated as if they were single family or multifamily. They'll pay full impact fees. ADUs are a little different in that the size limits are less, but they also have some impact fee waivers under state law. But we are helping people with ADUs or potential ADUs go through our ADU process. And then SB 9, we haven't had an application for an SB 9 unit yet, but we're hoping to establish an ordinance so that we have a clear process if someone does want to implement this.
Perfect. Thank you both. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Resendez?
Thank you. I'm just curious, what's the rationale behind the deed restriction? Why would we, I mean, if they split it, they're not going to split it again. Like, we know that. Is the deed restriction just to ensure that we have something on file saying it was already split so we don't split it again?
Correct. The deed restriction is in place for two reasons. One, it signals us that one did occur on the property, and two, if you were buying a property, you would want to know that you couldn't do it. So it's really for future property owners. It really helps them out. They know what they're restricted to. Oh, this lot was already split. I was thinking I could split it again because it's such a big lot, but I can't.
Got it. Thanks. What's the difference between the setbacks that are in SB 9 and the current setbacks that we have?
So the 4 foot and the 10 foot are greatly reduced, depending on the plan development that you're in, or the R1 zoning district, or the west of Fairview. There are all different setbacks, but we are typically at 6 to 15 to 20 in the rear, 6 on the side, 15 to 20 in the rear, but some plan developments have reduced setbacks.
You don't think we should revisit those setbacks so that we be consistent between all of them?
Well, the plan development, they went through the process to get their own special things, so they're all different. But if that is we are overhauling the entire zoning ordinance, so if you're thinking that you would like to reduce setbacks further in the side and rear, that's something we can still look at as part of the zoning ordinance overhaul.
I'm just thinking for the sake of consistency, I don't know if it's the way we should go or we shouldn't go. I'm just throwing it out there.
We can add that to the list when we get to the R1 section, for sure.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you. Can you go into why the short-term rental?
Why no short-term rental? So really, the purpose of Senate Bill 9 is to provide housing types and a variety of housing and increased density to provide more affordable by nature housing for the city and throughout the state of California. If you allow it to be an Airbnb, it's not affordable housing. It's getting rented at a daily, weekly rate, and then the person turns over again and again and again. So by prohibiting that, we're asking that this be used as what it's intended, is to provide additional housing for residents in the city.
So you're not talking about limiting, like, month to month?
No, it's
Okay.
30-day, so we're 30-day rental, and that should cover like an Airbnb type situation.
And then on the deed restriction, so if the lot is really big and again, in certain areas, you have lots that are about 5 acres. So you're saying if they split it once, they can't ever split it again?
Under SB 9, yes, they're prohibited from splitting it. I would imagine if you had a large lot that you'd be looking at a different type of development, because this would only give you 4 units, where if you had a larger property size, you could go to the R1 standards and do something different.
If I might just add really quickly to that, the purpose for that restriction, that's also in the state law, is that what you don't want is, these are ministerial approvals, right? You don't want someone to come and abuse the ministerial approval to subdivide a large lot into two, and then into two, and then into two, and then into two. That's when you get into a tentative map, and that's where the city has their own subdivision codes and processes and approvals. So SB 9 is purely ministerial at the staff level, so you can't just use SB 9 to split a lot over and over again.
Then I had another question on, like, planning's timelines and then fees associated. Because part of the reason for SB 9 is also to expedite and to make sure that it was not a burn in terms of cost to people seeking this out as a solution to.
So the timeline would be similar to an accessory dwelling unit, because that is also a ministerial action. They come in, there's just a few things we can check off against it. Like if they came in and they had a 2-foot side yard setback, we could say, this isn't, you need to fix this, whatever it is. But really, it's a staff level. We're not going to the planning commission. There's really no conditions of approval. It's a much faster process, similar to an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay. And then the part 2, the fees?
What are we charging?
So I think right now we don't have a specific SB 9 fee. We have what's called an administrative permit review, and I believe that that's about $1,000 for the planning review. But one thing that we'd like to do is look back at our fees, because there might be some new applications under new state laws that we want to reconsider and reevaluate what those true costs are. But the administrative permit review is a staff level review, so that's what we'd be charging for this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just going back to the fees, I think it's important we learn from the past where fees were kept artificially low, how it caused problems to this community. So it's very important. ADUs, as you pointed out, are at a lower fee, but this is something different, and be aware. We don't want to go down that path again. Thank you. All right. At this point, we'll open a public hearing. Do we have any speakers?
We do not have any speakers on this item.
This time we'll close public hearing. Any other questions or comments from council? Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the city hold a public hearing, which we've just now done, read by title only, waive full reading, and introduce an ordinance of the city of Hollister amending Title 17 zoning ordinance of the Hollister Municipal Code, and schedule a second reading and adoption of the ordinance for the December 19th, 2022 city council meeting.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. We'll now move to item F1.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, resolution number 2022-206, resolution of the City Council of the City of Hollister authorizing an agreement between the City of Hollister Animal Shelter and Best Friends Animal Society. Recommendation is to adopt a resolution authorizing the City Council of the City of Hollister to accept the $14,000 grant from Best Friends Animal Society. And President is Supervisor Alyssa Bautista for any questions you may have.
Hello again, Council and Mayor. I just want to go ahead and introduce this grant as a great opportunity for the shelter to increase our effectiveness in life-saving efforts. With this $14,000, we'll be mentored with a neighboring facility, Santa Clara County Animal Shelter, who's renowned throughout the state for their high save rates and life-saving efforts in the animal welfare industry. I have Lawrence Gomez, the animal shelter supervisor for Santa Clara County, on Zoom to kind of answer and field any questions he may have. I'm not sure if you guys had time to look over the overview of the grant, but they did provide us with a roadmap and potential ways to implement new programs, processes, and procedures to increase those life-saving efforts. One of those being the closure of the night kennels, as well as the ceasing of intaking healthy stray cats. Does anyone have any questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I do. I have just a handful of. First of all, who is Best Friends Animal Society? I didn't see anything in my council packet that really talks about who they are.
Yeah, so they're a nationally recognized organization with the main goal of trying to decrease the euthanasia rates within the shelter with new implementations and programs, most of them being with backed up shelter data throughout UC Davis and their own people who have received grants prior to.
Okay, and so I read in the packet information that they would be working with your staff, and so is they from the national organization, or would it be folks from Santa Clara County?
Correct, yeah, they pair us with a mentor with the highest save rates closest to us, and that's who they selected to kind of mentor us throughout this process.
Okay, and on item number 3, it talks about OS. What in the world does O/S mean?
That's owner surrender.
Okay, thank you. For the life of me, I could not connect the dots on that, and it was in there a couple times. Where it also talks on number 5, where it says increased funding for spay and neuter and treatment of sick and injured. Where's that funding going to come from?
That funding is going to come from the grant and be used just because our budget sometimes doesn't allow for the life-saving efforts that we would like, and that would be to push forward with animals that can be saved that have a healthy prognosis otherwise, but it's just a sometimes more costly medical procedure.
Okay, so that would come out of that $14,000 allocation?
Correct. And I know when they overlooked some of our processes and procedures, they wanted to do more basic care for our animals, just the basic vaccinations, rabies, distemper parvo, bordetella, and for our cats as well, because right now within our budget, it doesn't fit right now within our budget to offer even the most basic medical care for some of our animals.
Okay. In the council packet, I also noticed that towards the very end, it talks about the distribution of the resources, 3 separate payments to the city of Hollister in different increments, and also mentions the Santa Clara Animal Services, and so for $5,000. So is that connected, or is?
That'll be separate from our $14,000 allocation.
Okay. And so I do have some concerns on item number 2, even though I agreed that the night kennel should be closed. As I recall, it was a council majority that wanted those kept open. So having said that, does the Best Friends Animal Society have a room to move on that so that that could be kept open and we could still receive the grant, or is that a hard no?
So I think based off my conversations with them, the only way we're going to get this grant funding and continue to be open to even more grant funding is by being open to these new processes and procedures, because they've been proven to work. And that's why I have Lawrence here to kind of speak on that, because he's actually enacted it in his county, and maybe he could speak more to it and the effects it has and
Okay.
the benefits, if you'd like to hear from him.
Oh, absolutely, but just so I'm clear that if we choose not to close the kennels during the evening hours, the probability is we won't receive the grant. And what I just also heard you say is that this could absolutely be a stepping stone to future grants being awarded to this city as well?
Correct. By raising our save rate and implementing these new processes and protocols, we're open to even more larger grants for our life-saving efforts. So we're almost there. We just kind of need to push through and reevaluate some of our processes. A lot of them are outdated. And with the data we receive from UC Davis and neighboring agencies, these are implemented and proven to work.
Great. I would like to hear at the mayor's direction for our speaker and know that I support this 100%. Thank you so much.
Thank
So
you.
we'll go through all the questions from council, and then we'll come back and ask for his input. Go ahead, Mr. Resendez.
Thank you, and I apologize if I missed this. If we accept this, how long are we essentially required to do what's asked of us?
So I don't think there's necessarily any time frame per se. Are you talking about how long we have to?
Let's talk about closing the night kennels. What if we close them for a week? Are we good? Do we meet the requirements of the grant?
I don't think so, because it's not going to affect change.
Yeah, so
the way we need it
specifically,
to.
how long? Is there any language in there that says how long we have to abide by?
There's no
the
language
requirements?
per
No.
se, but I know with best friends, if we get to a certain save rate, it elevates us to a higher grant level, which could include
So
more.
this is my concern. I don't pretend to know. I'm not an animal expert. I don't pretend to know the specifics, but I do know that this could be a little controversial with the people that are extremely passionate in our community about saving the animals. If I'm looking at it from a logistics point of view, of course, your numbers are going to go down because we're not taking in animals from the night kennels anymore. We're not taking in animals that are OS, owner surrender. We're not going to take in, we're only going to take animals that we think that we can help. So all of these things I understand will make the numbers look better on paper. But I guess my biggest concern is, have we talked to these people that are so passionate about this? And I hope that they're here tonight. I don't know if they are. I would assume that they're not, because usually we can point them out. So I guess I'm a little hesitant for, number one, for the thing that Councilmember Tim Burns pointed out is that the closing of the animal kennels at night, I think we had all said we were not in favor of that. It was a little controversial, and I would just really like to hear back from our community partners that are really passionate about these topics, and I don't see them here tonight. I know they should have been here. Did you hear from any of them regarding this at all?
I have not, no.
No? Okay. All right. So I'm definitely on the fence, and I've got some hesitation to adopt it, I'll be honest.
Councilmember Resendez, just in regards to what you're just saying, the night kennels were closed for long periods of time when they were in repair. And closing a night kennel does not mean that people cannot go to the shelter during work open hours and turn in their animals if they choose to do that. Since the meeting when we discussed this, the discussion was to have a special meeting in regards to animal control and all the other issues in regards to that. We haven't had that meeting yet. And I really look forward to having that, because there's a lot of things that we need to discuss to take our shelter to another higher level. But since the discussion from the council not closing the shelter, how many more animals have been dropped off, abandoned in the
We've
night
had
kennel?
approximately 10 cases since Watsonville, Marina. We had the one we put out the press release for, where an animal was left in really poor condition to suffer throughout the night. Despite putting up new signs, we have sick kittens being left, and they shouldn't be left or permitted to suffer. That's something we're tasked with preventing, and I feel like we're just kind of harboring an environment for people to do that.
Now, as we covered before, we're the only place in the surrounding counties that has a night kennel. People who were later located, who dropped off, abandoned their animals in the night kennel, basically told our staff that they Googled where they can, and Hollister came up as a
Hollister's the
night
first
kennel.
one to pop up, yes.
Is that it?
Yeah, and just, I guess one more thing, like I said, I don't want to pretend like I know, and I can definitely see your point, but I can see their point too. That's why I'm a little conflicted, and I rarely do this when I'm sitting up here. I have my, I know where I'm at, but with this, I got to be honest. I'd rather have us see us have that meeting. I'd rather see that meeting advertised well, and for us to have a robust discussion with the community and the partners and the people who specialize in this industry, so that we can make a well-informed decision. I just feel like if we jump the gun on this, it might bite us in the long run. That's my one concern on this. And again, I rarely do that, but that's where I'm at with it.
Questions, comments?
So, thank you very much. Thanks for looking at how we can make our shelter an evidence-based or evidence-informed organization. I would like to hear from Lawrence. I know that Santa Clara County does a phenomenal job. I know that they do a lot of training, keep up with best practices. And while, change is difficult, I think, if we're all going towards the same goal, and that's to make sure that our animals are protected and there's humane way of making sure that and if our subject matter experts are telling us that the keeping it open only adds to the pain and suffering, I think we need to hear that. And then we also have Lawrence from Santa Clara County that is waiting to speak to us to also share in terms of their findings. I know that they keep a lot of data, so I'm eager to hear from him.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, if you can hang, just 1 second there. Sorry, sir. I think a lot of good comments were made here. I think early on, Mr. Resendez, a few years back, you tried to help make some changes by visiting Santa Cruz, and they had a lot of good ideas. And I think one thing we've seen over and over is a lot of comments, criticisms, but very little help in the end. And I think we experience this over and over. A lot of come over and throw things at us, and then when they ask, is there to come help, all of a sudden everybody's too busy. We've been threatened with lawsuits from a group that wants to take the grant money that was given to the city to improve our shelter for themselves. And these are the kind of things that keep happening with some of these other groups. I think long term, we all agree there has to be changes. And if it's from this group or another group, I think the point is implement things that start to work for long term. I can see why there's an issue as far as the night drop, because that can lead to people that really don't care and just, here, let me go drop my animals super sick and I don't care enough, so let me go throw them in there and head back out of town. So there's a lot of different arguments that can be made. I think it's, as you found out, Mr. Resendez, some of the ideas that were from Santa Cruz that really could have helped our own community. Now's the time to really start working on it. Thank you, Chief, I know you've been working hard to make a lot of these changes, and I think it's important, and I think the route you're going has been the right course here, and it's important that we set up a structure that we have the foundation that builds upon that, rather than a lot of promises. If we just give people the money, they'll fix something, and then they're gone the next day. So I'm looking forward to hearing the ideas from them, and including a lot. I would like to hear, as everyone pointed out here tonight, is let's hear from some of the other groups as far as Santa Cruz, what they're doing. I'm sure they're doing very similar things. There's proven methods, and that's the point. Sometimes you got to make that change, which is hard at the beginning, and later on when you make that change, all of a sudden everybody comes back and says, see, I told you should have done this a long time ago. When they were the ones stopping you from doing it in the first place. We keep seeing this, and those that bring in the bad ideas are always the same ones that run away and blame us for the mistakes they brought to us. So it's time to look at new methods, and I'm happy to hear from the gentleman today, and looking forward to hearing conversations to help benefit our shelter. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting us to this council meeting. We're very excited to work with the Hollister team. We've met with Alyssa and her team, and they're great. And I understand all of the concerns behind some of the items that were listed. And the goal behind these items is not to reduce services or to, limit resources to the community and to animals in the community. It's to figure out ways how to better serve and to be able to serve in the more humane capacity, so that we are meeting best practices, and we are providing best care to animals, and we are providing, best service levels to the residents of Hollister. And so the thing about the night kennels, we understand the concern about not having them. I do agree, it's a bigger conversation. I think we need to loop in some community members that are passionate about it, so that way we can all discuss, the pros and cons of having the night kennels. and figure out a way how we can continue providing service levels, but perhaps in a different way that, we can ensure that animals that need to be turned into the shelter for after hours are dropped off at a safe location or whatever the decision is, so that way we can mitigate any issues or help animals that may be suffering from either a medical or medical condition typically is what our concern is, or an underage animal that isn't fit to be away from its mother or in a shelter environment. So, we definitely want to have these bigger conversations, but it's not about limiting resources. It's about modernizing and aligning with best practices.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. Is this matter time sensitive to the grant being awarded? And where I'm headed with this is this something that we could push to the 19th so that we could get more community engagement, or is this something we need to make a decision on tonight?
They've been waiting for over a month now, and they're really looking for either an approval or, moving on.
Okay, thanks.
If I may,
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, isn't there another grant coming before us, and is it connected to this group as well?
It's connected to the UC Davis.
The UC Davis?
Mhm.
And that's a much larger grant. Do you think if this would be in jeopardy, if that one would also be in jeopardy if this one doesn't go forward?
I think so, just because UC Davis wants us to start implementing best practice as well. And I know I had spoken to one of their veterinarians regarding the night kennels. They should be coming up with a new shelter guidelines for humane treatment of animals, which is implemented throughout all California shelters, which is actually saying that night kennels are inhumane, and that should be published by the end of the year.
And I believe that is coming before the next council meeting, and I think that's a $50,000 grant?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Resendez?
Thank you, but most grants have a deadline. So is there a deadline attached to this one? If so, what is it?
There's no deadline attached. I've just had them on the hook waiting for over a month now.
So I can't support this for a number of reasons. There's no deadline. There's no timeline specified as to how long we have to abide by these. Again, I would like for us, if we can, to push this and all of the other issues that are being talked about to a date certain. And I'd rather do a special meeting, I'll be honest with you. And I'd like to see it well advertised so that we can invite the people that are passionate, other community partners, so we can have, again, a very good, robust discussion. Educate myself, educate the council, educate the community members about what some of these decisions we're going to do, how they're going to impact the services for our pet friends. That's what I would love to see. And if we can get that on board as soon as possible, I definitely would go for that. And I'd make a decision then. But as of tonight, I definitely cannot support this.
Thank you. Mr. Perez?
So our system right now is not working that well, is it?
No.
No. And this nationally recognized organization wants to come and help us with this whole situation. Mm-hmm. And as far as giving people an opportunity to come and say what they want to say, I totally agree with Mr. Resendez. Change is not always easy for us, but if this is a proven system, then I think it's a no-brainer. As far as pet-friendly people, I got a wabbit, I got a turtle, I got a koi fish, I got dogs, I got them all. You know what? I love animals, and I hate to see them mistreated or abused or neglected. And if this is going to help our system to become a better system, because all of our systems need to become better, and even when they become better, they need to become better. So I am in total support of this, and thank you for all these different grants that are coming our way through your department. Good job.
I'm in full support as well. Thank you for doing all the research and reaching out for not only technical assistance, but also academic assistance in terms of best practices. And I'm looking forward to reading the research on night kennels.
And so, does our animal shelter collaborate with other organizations? Or are you open to collaborate with other organizations?
Yeah, so I'm actually part of a huge shelter management group throughout the state. So we work on transfers with other shelters for some of our hard to reach animals that may have been here for 5-6 months, trying to get them a fresh view. So we'll get help from other shelters, and we'll also outreach when we have the capacity to do so to return the favor. So it's a huge group
Network.
effort. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mr. Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. For either the assistant city manager, or city attorney, this feels really odd to me because most grants I'm familiar with are very detail specific, and perhaps we weren't, the information wasn't provided to us. But, again, I think that I'm going to support it. I said at the beginning, and I said at the last go-round, but I also have some concerns about, I think Councilmember Resendez brought up a real good question, as in, so if we move forward with this and we decide it's not working for us, or we do get a backlash of complaints from people about the shelter or the night drop being shut down, how are we contractually obligated, and is this consistent with other grants? I've only been involved directly in a few, but this feels very loose to me, and I would have thought it would be very well written and very, very clear and concise.
Thank you.
So in the agenda is, or part of the agenda packet, is Best Friends Animal Society Save Them All. It's a letter that's serving as the acknowledgement between the shelter and the Best Friends Animal Society. And so the city is making specific commitments as outlined in that letter. So you would be bound by those commitments if you accept this money.
Can I ask?
Does it say for how long, though? I guess that.
It doesn't. There's no timing in there. And typically, I do see time limits with grants. This is different than anything I've seen. It doesn't mean it's not allowed. It's just different.
So would there be a way to tighten this up in legalese so that, I think it's a great pilot project. I believe it's going to be successful. I desperately want it to be successful. I think it makes the shelter more efficient, more effective. I think the community will support it. I know over years, the San Benito County Civil Grand Jury has often made comments about the shelter and concerns as well. So I think it's a good deal, but it just feels like it's an open-ended, and so I just don't know what our legal exposure is by signing off on this as it relates to how long we need to honor this if it's not working. So
Right, and it's not specific. If it's not working, the contract doesn't say. It doesn't mean you can't, prior to accepting the grant, go back and try to negotiate it. My understanding is that there are some concerns from staff regarding timing and the availability of grant funds if you wait.
Right, and I get that, and I absolutely, want to move forward with it, and I'm going to vote yes tonight, but it's a qualified yes with reservation about the tightness of this grant, and perhaps this could serve as a I don't like the word warning, but I can't think of a better word, that moving forward, I absolutely want things that are more well defined, because this to me is like, as a painting contractor, you do work and you either do it on a contract or you do it at what's called time and materials. And when you do time and materials, it feels like you're just opening up your checkbook, and in this case, it feels to me like we're just there's just a lack of clarity to the longevity of this thing. So, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, if I can add, hang on, or ask, this partnership, how did this partnership form, where did this relationship build from? How did this come about? Did they just approach us, or did you reach out to somebody else? How did this get started?
I researched grant funding opportunities and applied for anything I could to kind of help us, get some plans in motion here for the
Good,
animals.
Awesome. I think that's exactly what you want to be doing, so thank you for that. But I do hear the concern. I understand. I'm reading something too that says tentative plan subject to change. So I understand what Mr. Burns is saying. I think it's going to be a good path to go. But I think Mr. Resendez is the one that said this, or Mr. Burns, I think, said this. Is it not possible to go ahead and get a date certain to just have a deeper conversation about it? I mean, I don't see the timelines, and I'm kind of wondering. I know, Chief, what you had mentioned, some grants, but
I think that the question is how long we're supposed to keep it closed, and I think the obvious answer is that the best practices of people who do this for a living are telling us we shouldn't have one. We should not have a night kennel. And I think that the expectation is that we stop doing that, because all it is offering an opportunity for animals to suffer more and to be abandoned by irresponsible dog and cat owners. Closing a night kennel does not mean we won't have any services at night. When we have an animal that is in need, they can call the police. We're 24/7, and we have on-call staff for animal control. So if need be, they would come out at night. So closing a night kennel doesn't mean that suddenly the animal can't get the help it needs. It's just going to stop people from consistently using that night kennel, going after hours and dropping off animals without following the paperwork, without even letting us know where they found the animal, so that we can give us a chance to find and rehome that animal with the owner. It's 10 cases plus since the last time it was here before you, of people abandoning, and many of them coming from other communities to our community to drop off those animals. So I think the intention of the contract is for us to stop doing that, because it's not in the best interest of the animals in our community. We'll be out there 24/7, the animals, and there's on-call staff every day of the week for emergencies.
thank you, sir. Mr. Resendez? Yeah, hang on, I know, but
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question for the city attorney. This letter serves as acknowledgement between Hollister Animal Shelter and Best Friends Animal Society to work together, and it goes on and on and on. The following commitments will be agreed upon. This is from the Best Friends part. On the bottom, Hollister Animal Shelter understands that they are required to commit to implementing new skills and programs as appropriate to increase positive outcomes of the organization. Here's the tentative plan, and then in parentheses it says subject to change. It's telling us that we have to do all of these things, but to me, that language is a little too ambiguous. What does that mean legally? It could mean a lot of things, right? I'm just feeling...
It could. And under contract law, ambiguities are construed against the drafter. But it doesn't mean you wouldn't potentially end up in some sort of disagreement over subject to change.
And one of those things that I want to point out is closing the night kennels. Stop accepting all the things that were listed on our, but the subject to change, that's what we're agreeing to. It doesn't feel very clear and concise to me. So that's why I cannot support it tonight. I just want to make that very clear to everyone. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Morales.
So I think anytime you're negotiating with, when you're receiving a grant, especially for technical assistance, and I also like to hear from Lawrence on this, is for demonstration projects that are evidence-based. Anytime you implement those strategies on a particular site, there's an evaluation period, typically 6 months to a year to 18 months, where you have to show demonstrated outcomes. Normally you have a control and treatment group. And so we have years of data based on the various elements you're hoping to either change, close, or implement new strategies that will help in terms of whatever you're trying to accomplish. So part of that can be written as you're making that agreement. And also, if Lawrence wants to add in terms of your experience with technical assistance, this is a technical assistance grant. If you have any experience in terms of the length of the demonstration project, within 6 months, a year, or 18 months, you can demonstrate, based on the data, whether this worked or not within our community. And that's what the various grants do, and that's what a technical assistance grants do, is to help you implement strategies that are going to help with positive change, not force you to, force you to implement a strategy that is going to do more harm to your community.
Okay. Do we have any speaker cards?
Can you hear me again?
Hold up for a second. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was just responding to council member. So in my experience with the Best Friend grant, they do have a year timeline, and the goal is to close the life-saving gaps. And so what their measurement is that they like to get shelters to a 90% live release rate or higher. And so to achieve that, they evaluate various programs within the shelter to try to bring them up to best practices to be able to meet that percentage in the grant. And they do quarterly check-ins with the organization to check in and see how things are going, and also to either reorganize if things aren't going great. And so they're very supportive of shelters, and they understand that not everything's black and white. And so they're, in my experience, they've been very flexible with the organizations.
Thank you, sir. Do we have speaker cards?
No, we do not have any speaker cards on this item.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I'll make the motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the city of Hollister to accept the $14,000 grant from Best Friends Animal Society.
Thank you. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Against?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. We'll now move to item G, reports from city council members regarding their committees. Councilmember Burns,
Thank you, Mayor. I have nothing to report.
Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, we're meeting with COG to interview and to get a new executive director on board. That process is still ongoing and nothing's been solidified as of yet. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Perez.
Excuse me, nothing to report.
Councilmember Morales.
December the 8th at 6 o'clock, City Hall, we have our business meeting. We'll be talking about the bike rally.
Okay, I have nothing to report. We'll go now to item G2, informational reports. Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to start by congratulating the Hollister Rebels youth football team on their recent championship. Congratulations to the organization and all of the players. Well done. Also like to wish good luck to the Hollister Vikings on their quest for a championship in Florida. Good luck to the organization and congratulations. Well done. I'd like to congratulate the Hollister Baylor's football team on their success this year. They fell a little short, but it wasn't for lack of effort, and you can't win them all. I'd like to get a status report on the Shot Spotter program. I know I've been talking about this for a period of time, and so I'd like to see something happen on that. I'm concerned that we continue to have some high-profile things, and I think that would help. Also, like to get a update on the cameras for the skate park. That's something that's been pending for a period of time, as well as cameras for the entrance to the two entrances into Sunny Slope Village. And I know that these are on a document later in the council report, but they're still heavy on my mind. Also still would like to get a status report on the new downtown sign that this council authorized for $250,000 that I thought was going to be up by now, and unless it's gone up in the last week that I haven't been downtown. I'd like to know when that's going to happen. That's a lot of money, and timing's everything. I'd also like to get the financials, the profit and loss for this year's 150-year celebration, to know how that all ended up. I've not seen anything on that. And finally, I would like to just suggest that rolling into January, that we start conversations, public conversations, formal conversations on the adoption of the next year's budget. And so with that, Mayor, that concludes my comments. Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Resendez?
Thank you. I think we forgot one, Mr. Burns. The Cowboys are leaving tomorrow to go to Florida. The cheerleaders are competing in a competition. So congratulations to them. And we are rooting for all of you guys that the council member had pointed out. I just want to ensure that the next meeting, we're going to have the consideration for the patches for the police department. I think we had support for that, for the LGBTQ plus community in light of the recent tragedy that occurred in Colorado Springs. I'd like to have that discussion as soon as possible. I just want to say thank you to the rec department and everybody, all the volunteers that put on the Lights On Parade. I'm sure you'll probably hear that a few times tonight, but not just the Lights On Parade, but all of these traditions and all of these actual community events that we do. These are some of the ones that we're known for. Everybody comes out to it. It was a lot of fun. And it was a great honor to be a part of that this year. I enjoyed being in the parade and not just watching. Usually we watch from the sidelines, and we had a great time. It was wonderful to see all the staff out there. I think it's important. We need to have a presence. We need to have conversations. We need to talk to our constituents and get out there in front of them. So thank you guys for allowing us to participate, and thank you for participating as well. Great job. And then for the Breakfast with Santa, I went to it. It was packed. It's packed every year, and I usually go every year. And Breakfast with Santa, from what I see, it's families, it's the community going out there, taking their kids out there. These traditions, it's just really, really warms my heart to see them. Thank you to all the volunteers, all of the rec department, everyone that's out there putting this on. And I look forward to all of the activities that are happening this weekend, or is it next weekend as well at Overdone Park? I think it's next weekend. Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Vice Mayor Perez?
I just want to say Merry Christmas. God bless you all, and thank you for coming out to the these meetings. You know, this is what it's really about, and that's it. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Councilmember Morales?
Well said, Vice Mayor. Thank you for those that took the time out of your evening to come speak with us. Thank you for doing that. Look forward to hearing from you. Happy holidays. Thank you to all the staff for all the hard work that you do, and we look forward to working with you in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Thank you, Rec Department, again, for all you guys do out there. Really keep our community, what people see it as, that perfect little town. So thank you. Mr. Burns, I did hear something about that sign recently. So from what I've heard, they're trying to get that installed before Christmas. And I don't know if that means the day before Christmas, a couple days or what, but as I understood, the frame of it's ready, and I think they want to get it installed in the next week and a half, I think, to get it ready before Christmas. But hey, it should have been done a long time ago, right?
Hopefully we can do some sort of a special event once that's done through the city. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
That is the intent, Council.
As I bring up at every meeting, I want to make sure that the lawsuit that we won, that was brought against the city by Irma Gonzalez and Elias Salinas, which when it came out was based on misinformation, false information, pure lies, just to grab attention, headline stories. The result was a loss that now they owe the city $27,000 because it was based purely on lies. I want to make sure that is followed through on collections, because I don't think something like that should ever happen again, where someone can just come out and just spread misinformation so they can get a headline story based on that and slander the city and council members with us. So please keep us posted on that. City Manager?
Nothing to report tonight.
City Attorney?
Nothing to report, Mayor and Council.
Chief?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to what was just brought up, ShotSpotter, we've been working with the company. I think we can bring something forward in January as a presentation. for the city. They recommended us provide a lot of statistics for them so that they can have the data to provide a good presentation for the city council, what a proposal would look like. Also, the skate park, there has been some electricity issues, trying to find electricity there. That's what's holding us back for a quote for that, because it makes a big difference if they're gonna have to bring in electricity. There's some existing poles there, haven't been used for a long time. We gotta find out where the junction box is and if it's still active, and that would make a big difference in the quote. And cameras on Beverly, both on Hillcrest side and Sunny Slope, were recently approved by the city manager. They should be going in before the end of the year. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that it, Chief? City Clerk?
Just to follow up on a comment earlier, the Christmas in the Park event will be at Dunn Park, and we're going to have ice skating Friday the 16th from 4 to 9, Saturday the 17th from 12 to 8, and Sunday the 18th from 12 to 4. Snow in the Park will be on Saturday, December 17th from 3 to 8. And so we'll also have food vendors and a maker's market there, so I want to invite the community all out to attend. And Santa. And laser tag. I'm sorry, I missed laser tag 3 to 8 on Saturday, December 17th as well.
Thank you. We'll now move to item, is that it? We'll now move to item G3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. G3 is a report to council in regards to RV parking in the city of Hollister, and specifically in the driveways of our homes. Over the last few months, several complaints have come forward to the council in regards to current ordinances in our city. The most common complaint stems from current ordinances not allowing recreational vehicles to be parked on private residential driveways. Some of the complaints also are in regards to recreational vehicles not being allowed to be parked on the city street. Attached to the report is the current ordinance that addresses recreational vehicles parking in our city, ordinance 10.10.030, private property parking and storage of recreational vehicles. One of the most common complaints involve residents advising they cannot find any storage facility to available for their recreational vehicles. I want to point out that code enforcement has made several calls to storage facilities in our city and the surrounding areas, and they've always been able to find some storage available. However, the larger vehicles, so like 40-foot recreational vehicles, some of the storage facilities are restricted. They won't take those larger vehicles because they're so big. Not all of them, but some of them. Staff believes it would be beneficial to share with the council, the public, some of the reasons why ordinances have been modified over the years to what we have today, and share some examples of other ordinances from other cities. In the packet, you received copies from Stockton, Santa Clara County, Fresno, and Gilroy. Of those, Gilroy is the only city that allows parking of recreational vehicles in the driveway under certain restrictions. Staff would also like to provide some options to change if the council decides to make those changes. The following are some of the reasons why recreational vehicles, RVs, boats, and trailers are not allowed to be stored or parked in the residential driveways in Hollister. In no particular order, one of them is access to the home can be blocked by a large RV parked in the driveway, which may impede fire department and other public safety personnel who may be responding to the home. Some RVs can also block secondary exits to the home, side yards, or block garage entry. RVs can also be the source of a fire because the vehicle usually has combustible material, including gasoline, propane, and diesel fuel, and/or diesel fuel. The fire source parked right next to the home can serve as a ladder effect where the fire in an RV can transfer to the home and cause increased property damage or loss of life. RVs stored in a driveway take up valuable space that is supposed to be allocated to passenger vehicles. If an RV is parked in front of a garage, it can potentially eliminate 2 parking spaces for vehicles. This will result in potentially 2 additional vehicles parked on our city streets. This is especially important because the current issue with excess amount of parked vehicles stored on our public streets impede street sweepers and the cleaning of our streets. Where a city is under increased mandates to remove debris from storm runoffs or that are affected by not having cars moved on a regular basis. and it leaves trash and leaves and other debris not accessible to our street sweeper. An RV can also be a visual impairment to a neighbor having difficulty in seeing approaching vehicles when reversing from their own driveway. An RV can also be an eyesore, a site clutter with old unused RVs stored in driveways. Some residents have come forward advising that their RVs are nice or newer. Just like to say that's very subjective. It all depends on the people and the neighbors that they have to see that every day. RVs can also be allowed to be stored in driveways very often or later are used for inhabitation. Code will find them connected to electricity and then receive complaints of people living in them. Staff recommends against changing the current ordinance and warn council that if they do change, they will potentially receive more complaints in the future from neighbors, residents who do not own the RVs. However, if the council would like to change our current ordinances and allow storage of trailers on private driveways, we do have these recommendations for these conditions. It's similar to other cities that do allow them. Number one, in no particular order, is only allowed if the RV does not already fit on a rear or side yard per the current code. Number two, the RV should be fitted and have a fitted and well-maintained cover to eliminate the visual clutter, no tarps or other makeshift covers. The current setbacks for prior prevention should be, the documents I provided said 3 feet, but I was advised by Fire Chief El Campo that 5 feet would be his recommendation from adjoining property, from any inhabited structure, including garage, from the overhang, and no intrusion into the sidewalk or other public property. Another restriction, if allowed to be RVs to be parked in the driveway, would be to must be parked perpendicular with the driveway, no horizontal or angled parking taking up additional driveway space. Limited to only one RV per residence. That means one RV, one motorhome, one boat, one utility trailer, just one of those, not all of them. The RV has to be on a pad approved by engineering, cement or pavers, whatever's required, and not on dirt or grass. The RV cannot be higher than 10 feet tall. The RV has to have current registration to a current resident of the property, no non-ops, and the RV should be in working order and operable, not dismantled or wrecked. The RV should be stored only in the enclosed positions, no slide outs open, and not inhabited at any time with the exception of actively cleaning, repairing, loading, or unloading. The current ordinance, those are some of the reasons why the city doesn't allow those, and some of the conditions if the city chooses to change the ordinance. I don't know, Paul, do we have a PowerPoint available with this? No? Okay. It's in the packet. But you can see it in the packet. There was some examples gathered by, on a very short notice by code enforcement, and some of the examples of some of the RVs that create blight and problems in our community. In that packet, you'll see photos of RVs that are up on blocks, some of them protruding into the sidewalk, some of them some of them old and with obvious visual clutter. The current ordinance also has a section that allows RVs to be parked in the driveway for 14 days. And that's to take in consideration people that may be loading the trailers for a trip. However, this section is very problematic. Staff would recommend that we do change that part. Staff recommends that we eliminate section 10.10.030-D5, the 14-day allowance, and replace it with the 72-hour permit that will allow residents to obtain the permit to load, unload, clean, and charge their RVs prior to and post trips. The permit will be limited to 4 permits per calendar year per address and or RV. They would have a 72-hour permit before their trip and have another 72-hour upon their return. The RV owner would be allowed to park in the driveway without the required setbacks, with the exception of not protruding into the sidewalk, or be allowed to park on the street, as long as it doesn't create an obstruction or traffic or line of sight. After the 4th permit, any additional permits would require a fee to be determined by the fee study to reimburse the city for the permit program. There shall be no more than 2 permits allowed, 1 leaving and 1 return per month. Staff believes this is a good balance to those who have RVs and want to retrieve them from off-site storage and be able to prepare them for trips, and also respecting the neighbors who can be potentially affected by constant use of or long-term parking of RVs in our neighborhood.
Chief Reynoso, we do have the presentation up if you wanted to show anything.
Okay. Code enforcement, and Desiree Martinez, you describe what?
Good
I think
evening,
that's the
Mayor and
first
City
one.
Council. Okay, so right here is some examples that we have. The picture to the left is an RV of somebody that was living in it, and they used a cover to cover the front so we wouldn't know that they were living in the RV. But if you go to the back, you can actually see the cords that were plugged in to the main structure. Picture to the other picture is an RV that is up on jacks, which is not safe when you get children that walk through there after school. That is a huge life and safety that we have come across. And go to the next slide. This is an example of an RV that we had somebody staying in. There's no access if there is a fire in those structures. There's not enough space there for a fire engine to go by because this individual had all his pop outs and it was plugged into the main structure for somebody living in there. This property had 2 boats. One that is stored on non-paved, and as you can see, that boat is over 12 feet in height, which is a huge nuisance as far as to the neighbor and also backing out of their property when they're pulling out from their side view. The next one, Paul. This property has completely covered their driveway with an extended unpermitted driveway, which now they have pulled their RV in and made a patio cover and put patio furniture in the front. This individual, they went and parked horizontal, which is a way for them to actually store that there. And now they've started spray painting. We don't know if it was the property owner or individuals, but the RV is spray painted. The next one, Paul. This would be considered an oversized boat that we would consider to be prohibited. It covers the property, and it's also not safe if you do have a fire in that property. There's no proper setbacks from that main structure, and it's taller than the main house. This RV is blocking all emergency exits. If there is a fire, the side house and the garage are being blocked. It is a longer driveway, which would fit something like that, but it's still blocking all the access, emergency exits. This is another one that was plugged in and someone was living in it on the public right of way. I don't know what happened with that one, but we wanted to trick you guys. So that is an RV that we received several complaints on. People wanted to know why we were allowing this RV because it was not a nice looking RV. That puts us in a situation where code enforcement has to go around and say, hey, your RV is not nice. I'm not going to allow this one, but I'm going to allow yours. So that's something that is not an easy situation when you have us approach the public for me to, tell them that their RV is not nice. So that's an example of that one. This is an example of an RV that does not have a proper cover. And as Chief said, if it does get approved, we would definitely want to go with appropriate coverage, which would be on our last slide. This would be something that we would consider a proper coverage if it is passed and approved, and that it would cover the RV from actually giving anyone an opportunity from living in it and not having to see if it looks like the previous slide where it was not a nice RV, as some people would say. And that's all of them that we've come across, or a handful of many. Yeah. Does you guys have any questions?
Thank you. Councilmember Sendes?
I'm just assuming those are all taken here in Hollister, right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I remember when I first got on the council, I think it was the mayor, and I think that was it. That's here still. We did have this conversation, and I'll be honest, I wasn't really understanding what the issues were when I first got on the council with a number of things, this including as one of them, right? But I've got to say I'm with the staff on your recommendations. Basically, I do a lot of canvassing and I do a lot of walking and knocking and talking, and I've seen a lot of these things out there, and they're pretty concerning, especially in my district. So I get the safety concerns. I get what the people that are coming here asking for this to be revisited for. I understand what their concerns are as well, but I have to say, when it comes down to it, it is considered a bit of a luxury. If you a responsibility comes with owning that luxury. A long-term responsibility comes with it. If you can afford to get an RV, and I get it, we live in an area where you can. There's lots of things for you to do, and to utilize that, then you're going to have to do your part to keep our city safe and aesthetically pleasing for everybody here. You're going to have to store it properly. If we go back and we revisit it and we want to change things later as far as how that goes, that's fine, but I'm going to go with what the staff recommends, just to keep it the same. And I do think that we should change the, was it the 10-day? 14 period, because I remember when we agreed about that. Now it's like, okay, how do we know that it's been 14 days? And people would kind of skirt around it. So I'm being very, very transparent here. I did not understand a lot of the things that you guys have to deal with. I have a way better understanding of it now, and I 100% agree with you that we should keep it the same, and of course we should go ahead and give those permits. And I'm sorry for the folks that are going to be affected by this, but we all have to do our part to make sure our city is safe and aesthetically pleasing, and that we're being good neighbors. That's where I'm at with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I got a question. So when you're talking on the height, you are talking 12 feet. Is that from the boat, the bottom of the vessel, to the top of the rig? Or is it from ground to?
From ground.
Okay. And I understand the blight project problematic area. It's like almost like you're judge and jury, you know, and that's a tough spot for you. I do like the permitting process, but I don't. Where are we going to take all of our RVs? I mean, I got an RV. I'm lucky. I got a place to take it. So but I understand, because I also have jet ski trailer and another trailer. But so I'm just lucky because I've tried to rent places out here. I can't remember the name of it, on San Felipe, and other places. And as far as just because I got an RV doesn't mean that I have a lot of money. It means that I planned and I budgeted for this. And when you go to to pay your taxes and to register your vessel and stuff, they ask you where it's stored. Part of the problem should be that if we're going to be storing it at your place, why are they just asking where you're storing it instead of saying, you can't store this in the city? It has to be, I don't know, it's probably none of their business or anything, but it is kind of confusing and misleading when the tax people are saying, oh, you're going to store this at your house? Okay, yeah. That's very misleading. So I understand the whole blight thing. I do like the permitting process. That was a good solution, because I pull up my RV, I move my cars to the park because I live close to the park. I don't take my neighbor's spots because it starts fights. But I would support putting one vessel per property if it follows all the rules that you guys were talking about. That's pretty much where I'm at.
Mr. Burns?
Mayor, I have a fairly long list of questions and concerns, and I'd like to reserve the opportunity to speak after public comment,
Sure.
please.
Absolutely. Mr. Ellis?
Mine are not that long. So on page 98, bullet number 6, RV has to be on a pad approved by engineering. There isn't a timeline. There isn't a description of, whether it's an application or if it's an appointment. We've heard from other residents that they can't go in and talk. They have to make an appointment and pay a fee. And so there isn't clarity in terms of if residents need to make an appointment with planning, what's the timeline, if there's a fee, how long they're gonna have to wait, because, a lot of people don't live here. 55 to 60% of our residents don't live here, so that's an investment, part of planning as well. So couple of concerns. While I don't, believe 14 days is a long time, but I'm not really sure if 72 hours is fine or not. I don't know how long it takes. I don't own an RV, but it seems really restrictive. Also, too, on the number of permits, 4 permits per calendar year means that we're basically telling people that they can only go on trips twice a year. To me, that seems really restrictive. So we said permit to go. So each way is a permit. So that means like 2 trips, So is that 4 permits? So I need clarification on that.
If I may, it says 4 trips are with no charge at all. But if you're going to continually be parking your RV on the street or in your driveway that many more times, there would be a fee for the following permits. So there are limited number of permits with the exception of 2 per month. So that the issue has been a lot of people, some, God bless them, they have a lot of time to go on a lot of trips. But then their RV is going to be parked on the street or in their driveway for a long period of time. And to try to get that balance, they can have additional permits, but it would be at a fee after a fee study to pay for the permit, regulating the permit process. We need to make sure that the right person requested the permit and how many per vehicle per address. So that's the way some other departments do that. And it's just a way to, instead of having a 14 days that nobody's going to be able to track when did it show up, when did it leave. It's 72 hours, that's 3 days. That's time, 1 permit for them to load it and leave, and another 72 hours when they come back to unload it and remove it from there. And when they get those permits, code enforcement would be notified, police department would be notified that they do have an existing permit so that their vehicles are not cited during those 72-hour periods of time when they're loading and unloading their vehicles.
Okay. Did you have a question? Can I finish mine? Okay. So at least in my district, and I know this is all of Hollister, but when I drove around, I didn't see a lot of what was shown, so thank you for sharing a lot of information. When I spoke to at least my neighbors or residents within my district, they did have a hard time finding places. They stated that there was a long waiting list, or the areas that had availability were subpar. There was trouble with vandalism. There was trouble with having animals that would come in and, thank you, rats, come in and do stuff to the property. And so there were, there were risks associated to actually driving it. They felt better or more secure having their RV within their property. With a lot of the residents, at least that I saw within my district, they were not reflective of the representation that was stated here today. Also understanding that Hollister is really big and diverse. So, but it impacts everyone. So looking at it from a broader perspective in terms of policy, this is going to impact probably jurisdictions from a social, economic, equity perspective. It's going to impact certain areas more than others.
Is that it?
One more question. So how does this pertain to cars? Cars are included in this also, as far as like people that are, bring in a shell of a car and park it in their driveway?
That's a separate violation. It's a separate. The only mention of cars here is that if the RVs are parked in a driveway, you would assume that their vehicles are parked on the street instead of being parked in their driveway or garage.
Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. First one is Jesse Fernandez.
Well, I'm Jess Fernandez. I have a property here in Hollister. I had a boat and a trailer parked on my property. It's well exceeded the rights of the sidewalk and everything else. It didn't impose on anything. And I was requested by the police department to have it moved, okay? The first violation I seen, I didn't ignore it, but I figured it's kind of ridiculous. So then I received my second one. I got in contact with the police department, and I've since moved them. It costs an additional $300 a month now. So maybe I can get a rebate back from the taxes on my property, since I figured to turn around and park it on my property, since it was my property. I didn't know I had to deal with CCNRs of the city of Hollister. I didn't think I was living in a gated community, another portion of that, and that's basically what I have to say. I think it's a heck of an infringement on somebody's pocketbook, for one, and their concerns in their own property and how they can maintain them and keep them under their own site. I think we should be allowed to do that. We've worked hard for everything we've worked for, and I think we should be able to have the entitlement of keeping an eye on it, personally. I don't know what you guys consider valuable, but what you guys consider valuable, do you set it in another location where you don't have a view on it? That's irresponsible. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Next, we have Christy Clark.
I'm Christy Clark. I'm also a Hollister resident. So I heard mention of the availability of parking spaces in the storage facilities around. We called Mini Mac Storage that's on San Juan Road, and they did have some availability, but they also have a large line of homeless RVs where people are actually living in them. There were RVs in disrepair that were in the facility. They had said that there were that they had vandalism in those in the RVs that were parked there. San Felipe Storage, when we first got our RV, had a whole lot of RV storage. That has been replaced with storage units. So you can't store your RV there. There's a very limited amount. We did store our RV at a Right Space Storage, also off of San Felipe, I think. And we got more damage to our RV there. So storing it on our property, we've tried 3 different places. Storing it on our property, we're at least able to make sure that our RV is safe. Lots of people got RVs during COVID because you weren't taking these great road trips with your family and able to stay in hotels and guarantee that everybody was safe. So if I can go someplace with my family and stay in my own RV that I can guarantee is only as germy as we bring in, right? That's why we have it. It is a luxury, guaranteed, but because we do that, it's, that's how our family is able to vacation. And we having to pay for storage that, there might be some available, but there's not. If you look around how many RVs are in the city of Hollister, there are not those spaces. You're not going to find those if you call around. There may be 1 or 2 here or there, but that's not going to solve your RV storage issues. Also, height requirements. We don't have a large RV. It's a 24-foot RV. It's 11 feet tall. And ours isn't a large, it's not a 5th wheel or anything else. 10 feet is absurd with modern RVs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Stephen Beck.
Hello, my name's Stephen Beck. I just wanted to talk about the RVs. I have a travel trailer, fits in my driveway. I have one vehicle. They both fit in the driveway. They're not sticking out on the street or the sidewalk or anything, impeding on anything else. And I just think it's ridiculous that it's my private property. I should be able to put whatever I want there. I do believe that all the conditions that the staff recommended to allow people to keep their RVs in their private driveway, I think I meet all those. So I just want to encourage the council to go forward with these changes. And then the other thing I didn't really care for was the permit thing. If I'm allowed to keep mine there, I don't need a permit, right? But there's others that are going to have theirs in storage, and getting a permit is a big, just more hassle, more hoops to jump through, more money. So I just want to encourage you guys to make these changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris Larkin.
Good evening. I have a right to enjoy my property. We all as property owners have a right to enjoy that property. And that's based on legal doctrine on property rights. And the city currently has these ordinances that infringe on that right to allow additional government to infringe on these rights is ludicrous. Currently, this government doesn't have a way to enforce these laws. What you do have a way to enforce is blight. When a property owner is creating a nuisance to their neighbors, then they should be able to go to their city government, go to their police force, and make a complaint and get some form of fix for this. To have an armed officer come to my house on Saturday and attempt to enforce these when I've heard that these codes aren't even supposed to be enforced right now. So you need to do something about it. I agree that blight is something that is within the government's realm, the city government's realm, to fix, but not infringe on the rights of these trailer owners, these RV owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carson Clower.
Good evening, Council. My name is Carson Clower. I'm with K2 Solutions. I'm a resident of the unincorporated area of San Miguel County. And I appreciate your work on this. I do not envy your position. This is going to be tough no matter what you guys do. I do think you'll have to find the balance between the property rights of owners and the right to enjoyment of their neighbors. So that's going to be a tough task for you guys. I do think that, at least for me, the biggest part of this is just the safety aspect. I've been taking my kids to school and I'll see RVs that extend out into the public right away by 6-8 feet, forcing kids into the street to go around the backs of the RVs. And when you look at the RVs, they go all the way up to the garage, so the people know that they do not fit. So in those cases, I would hope that the code enforcement or the police can get out there pretty quick, because, I mean, you wouldn't want to see somebody in a wheelchair having to wheel out into the street to just go around somebody's RV. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that there's been numerous instances where people talked about a lack of space for RV storage. I am working with a client who owns property on Airway Drive, who is going to be coming forward with an application that's going to be a combination mini storage, RV storage. And I do think that he's leaning more towards a bigger portion of the property being for RV storage. So hopefully the planning department and the planning commission will see that in the next couple months. If you have any interest in that, I'd love to get you in touch with that owner so you can get some more details, and any support going forward would be much appreciated. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have no more public comment.
Thank you. Bring it back to the council. Councilmember Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. So, could we pull the PowerPoint up, please, again? This is going to ask council's indulgence. It's going to take a little bit of time here. So while we're doing that, in the spirit of transparency, I do want to put out there that I don't own any kind of an RV or a trailer, but my wife co-owns one with her brother. And so occasionally, if you go by my house, you're going to find a 13-foot trailer parked in the driveway. But I've been assured by the city attorney that it's okay for me to participate in this conversation. So I just want to put that out there to begin with. So, how many of the first of all, how many actual complaints received on RVs or boats have we received in 2022 to this point?
I can't give you an answer for 2022, but I can tell you since I've joined the police department, I've had over 300 complaints on RVs and boats.
Okay.
Do you have one for 2022?
Just RVs is 67.
67, so the other 240 or so are boats?
Well, that was just for 2022. I didn't go back any further.
As far as when I started here, we've gotten lists from individuals that have given us, just in the last month, we've gotten how many on there?
Oh, I personally talked to a guy today who told me
250.
He said that he drove around and said, I have a list of 250 people.
Okay, but this is one guy driving the city of Hollister and taking note. It's not 250 neighbors snitching each other off.
No, but what causes this, just like with Mr. Larkin, to give an example, is somebody got complained on. We gave them a warning. Then, so they called us and they're like, well.
Can we have you speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
These people have RVs here. Why didn't you do anything about them? And normally, if we go to a street, receive a complaint, and we'll see the other complaints, we'll address those as well. Where it's not as if we just got a complaint on this one and ignore the rest. We'll usually go around, and if it's in one area, like Bayberry was one area that we had to give several warnings, and Freedom and Liberty Drive was another one. I think Liberty Drive actually stemmed from two complaints. We wound up getting like 10 or 12 out of that area. So that's how it stems. So that's the reason why I went to Mr. Larkin's house on Saturday to just give him a warning, just to let him know, hey, this is how we work.
Okay, so that was more of a proactive effort on your behalf as opposed to responding to a complaint on his property?
That was based on a complaint.
A complaint from a neighbor?
From somebody else who had driven around and complained about.
Okay, so we've got some looky-loos that are driving our neighborhood. I'm going to try and be as respectful as possible. They're frequent flyers. They may have been complained on themselves, so now they're going to snitch everybody else off in the city.
Correct.
Okay, but we know about snitches.
And unfortunately, what is happening is, like you said, we'll address one, and the individual then give us a list. I mean, we've gotten emails between 20 to 30 RVs with pictures of locations that we didn't do our job because we missed those ones.
Right. I hear your pain. I understand more than I'm going to express at this moment. How much proactive education of our community have we done in regards to this? As far as, have we sent anything out in the water bills? Have we sent anything out in any proactive effort other than having a handful of people complaining about 250 or 300?
So in 2020 and 2021, we did send out some literature. We have not sent anything out in 2022, but before we address anyone with an RV, we give them an education. We give them opportunity to give us a call. We give them 14 days to correct it. We even give them an opportunity for an additional extension. So we educate, then send out a compliance order. It's not until your third notice you're actually even receiving a citation.
Do we actually have a hearing officer for the city?
We do.
And who is that?
Miller, Chief Miller.
Okay, and is Mr. Miller an attorney? No. For the city attorney, my understanding is in order to be a hearing officer, you have to be an attorney with 5 years of good standing in California bar. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's correct or not. I'd have
Okay.
to look at it.
Okay, I would argue it is. And so, if we're gonna enforce on these things, we have to be able to provide due process. And I would argue our due process is flawed at this point through no fault of anybody's here. However, City Attorney, I'd ask that you confirm that for us and bring back that information. I think the government code pretty much clearly defines what's required there. So, when was this current ordinance that we're enforcing adopted?
Was it 97, I believe?
25 years or so ago? And somewhere in the staff report, it talks about it's been modified. When has it been modified?
So about 5 years ago, we addressed this, the same RV situation, and it was changed as in a suspension, but not a modification. I want to say it was roughly about 5 years ago, 4 years ago. I remember.
I heard what you said. I don't understand what that means, though. It was not modified, it was suspended. So what?
So this same exact conversation came up 4 years ago, and we had put, I want to say it was a freeze on it. We didn't change the code, we just put a freeze. So everything that we had addressed was put on hold, and council at that time had asked us to go ahead and allow them until further notice.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, it was around, I thought it was 5, but
I think you're right.
it was 4 years.
And then, like, it was freezed, and then we addressed it when I was on.
Correct.
So did we ever unfreeze it?
We did.
When did that happen?
Right after, because everyone brought their RVs right back.
Okay.
And it got out of control again.
Okay. Is freezing an ordinance actually a legal thing? It kind of sounds like it's not. I'm really confused, and frankly, I'm a little embarrassed. I don't know how you freeze something and then you unfreeze it. Those aren't legal terms, those aren't legal processes that I'm aware of.
Well, no, it's not a legal process I'm aware of either. Freezing and unfreezing wouldn't be the terms.
I mean, I could understand staying enforcement until it's resolved, but.
Correct.
But this whole thing is a mess in my opinion. And so, there was comments made that, the fire department, could be impeded to a home by an RV or a boat parked in the driveway. When was the last time we know that happened? Or are we talking about what-if scenarios here?
I don't think the fire chief gave me any examples. He's just his recommendation, and it's consistent with the current ordinance right now that does allow, if you have the room for it, to store it on the side of the building, side of the home, and there is a restriction for 5 feet, and that's for fire prevention.
So it's more of a prevention than we actually have an experience where that's happened.
That is correct.
So also in the staff report, it talks about RVs parked in a driveway have been a source for a fire. Does anybody know if that's actually ever happened here?
Not off the top of my head, no. It states that they are a source because they do have combustible material inside.
Okay. Then the report talks about where an RV can be a ladder when parked next to a home and the home has caught fire or could catch fire. Do we have an actual incident where that's ever really happened that anybody knows of?
No.
I think they're talking about the RV catching fire and then ladder, or say jumping into the house. I don't know of any specific time that's happened. It's just what the fire chief recommended.
Right. And Chief, you've been here how many years?
Myself, 24 plus years.
24, so you don't know of any of these things happening in the 24 years to your recollection?
My recollection now,
Right.
I'm sure they could have happened. I don't respond to all the fire
Of course,
calls.
I understand. How many RVs have you responded to in 2022 where people have been living in them?
I'd say about maybe 15.
15. And at some point, was that allowed because of COVID?
No,
No, so it wasn't a means for people to potentially isolate?
no.
Okay. Can you approximate, if we leave the existing ordinance in place or with the staff's recommendations, how many people are we gonna have in violation?
Well, the average RV runs about 24 feet is what we'd said, and I'd say most of them are larger.
I'm sorry, maybe I wasn't clear. We have approximately, as I understand it, 42,000 residents in the city of Hollister. And I don't know the total number of residential units in Hollister. But I drove down 2 blocks and I can count 2 handfuls, and I quit counting because I had to leave my shoes on. Having said that, I suspect there are probably thousands of potential violators based on this current ordinance. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
And
It's a bit much.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, officer.
I said, think 1,000 is a bit much.
Do you?
You say thousands, I mean, like I said, I mean, you're looking at maybe hundreds.
Okay, all right. A whole bunch, though.
Sure.
Right, and right now, as I understand it, we have 1 code enforcement officer, and we have 1 that's gonna be hired.
We have us. Yes.
Oh, okay, okay, so, all right, so we have 2.
Sure.
Okay, all right, for a city of 42,000 people, okay. Can we go slide by slide on this, and again, we tell us what each of these slides reflects?
So on slide 1, the picture to the left, there was an individual living in there. And when I actually arrived at this property, he had left his dog abandoned in there. When they called him out, that was his residence. That main house right there rented him out that RV.
Okay. So that's clearly not okay by many codes beyond this. Is that not true?
Correct.
Okay. And so I think everybody can agree that's not going to fly, and you could absolutely hold the property owner accountable for that action, could you not?
Correct.
Okay. Next slide, please.
RV on jacks, which is a life and safety for anyone that's walking past that could fall. It wasn't stable, and you can't see in this picture, but it's actually close to the main structure. I'd say less than 2 feet from the property line of the neighboring.
Okay, and so that I would think, and city attorney, feel free to weigh in here, but I would think that that's clearly not only a public nuisance, but an attractive nuisance where somebody could absolutely be hurt. Jacks are not a permanent way to support something like that. So again, I think we have a process already to deal with something like that.
I think attractive nuisance arguments are reserved for the people being injured against a property owner, not necessarily a code enforcement issue for the city, but I don't have the code memorized.
Okay. These 2 slides, please, officer.
The one to the left, that RV is encroaching into the public right-of-way, which is causing children and people on wheelchairs to have to go into the street.
100% a big problem. And do we or do we not have a California Vehicle Code that could also address that?
We do.
We do. We also have an ordinance.
Right, okay. But if we didn't have an ordinance, we could still address that through the California Vehicle Code, correct?
It's a parking site.
That's correct.
Yeah, but it might even be a better, quicker remedy, frankly.
Sites, I think $38 or something like that.
Every day?
We don't routinely go back every day. And
I got you. All right, the next slide, please.
This one, we have 2 vehicles. That RV is butted up to the white vehicle and butted up to the vehicle in the back, which is now encroaching into the public right-of-way, causing children and wheelchairs to go into
Essentially, the same issue could be resolved through a parking ticket or the city ordinance. Okay, next slide, please.
This one, they are living in that RV. As you can see, it's all popped out, and They have it plugged in. I don't know if you could see the little orange arrow that's in the street, but they are plugged in. They already have 3 vehicles here, 2 in the driveway, 1 that's encroaching in the public right-of-way. That is a very large RV, and it would not fit in that driveway.
Gotcha. And so obviously the white vehicle is in violation of the vehicle code as well as the city code, could be addressed either way. How long can somebody legally park a RV on the street under the vehicle code?
72 hours.
Okay, so that could actually be addressed through the vehicle code as well? Okay,
Correct, but when they're living in it, it's a different case.
okay. How do you address it when they're living in it? Or what, because clearly this is not parked on a driveway, so what codes would you use?
So we would go with the RV code, which is the 1010.020, which is an RV stored in the public right of way. So it could be addressed by ourselves or by the police.
Okay,
department.
all right. Next slide, please, Paul.
This one is a violation as it's parked on non-paved. We do have a code that states a vehicle or anything has to be on paved driveway.
Okay, yeah, so that again could absolutely be addressed through another mechanism. Okay, next slide, Paul, please.
This is an RV that is, like I said, they pulled out their patio cover and they made it their front residence. They put patio furniture there, and they are in violation as well as for an extended driveway.
So extended driveway, can you explain that a little bit more?
Our code only allows you to extend your driveway out to 6 feet, which would be 3 feet on each end or 6 feet additional. They've paved their entire property.
Okay, so that is a secondary violation in addition to the RV having been parked there, what I presume would be more than 14 days?
Correct.
Okay.
They also don't have an approach to drive that up there.
Okay, so there, I guess where I'm headed with this is there are a lot of other ways to address these specific cases.
To get the RV moved?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Next slide, Paul, please.
This one does not meet setbacks as far as the neighboring properties or the structure, and then it's just parked horizontal.
I actually drove by that this week, and I won't name where it's at because I don't want to draw unnecessary attention. But it doesn't. When I went by there on Saturday, it does not appear to create any kind of a visual obstruction from what I could see. I mean, I went up and I went down, and surprised you didn't call on me as a suspicious person. But and my recollection, that thing's been there for a long, long time. Now, I presume it moves, but
It's also blocking the entrance of that garage, so there's no entrance into that property.
so there's no man door into it anywhere?
No, the man
garage?
door is being blocked.
The man door is being blocked, and is there a garage door as well?
I couldn't see the garage door. I only seen the man door.
Okay, all right. Next slide, Paul, please. Okay, big tall boat. What's the issue with the boat?
It's just in our code a violation of having a recreational vehicle. We got a call on it and we addressed it.
Okay, all right. And I'm not disputing, you get a call, you go. I understand that. I just, from the vantage point of the photograph, I know it's tall, but probably 3 or 4 feet of it is because it's on a trailer, and we absolutely want it in a trailer. But I personally don't see where that creates a hazard, but I get how some people would be offended by seeing it because they don't like it, you know. So, all right, next slide, Paul.
This is another one that somebody, it was plugged in to the main structure. There's no exits from the side gate or the garage. It's blocking it. It does fit on this particular driveway because this driveway is in a longer area than a standard driveway, but it's just a larger RV. As far as the neighboring part, I did not get a call on it blocking, but this would be an example of somebody that could possibly have a view blocking when pulling out.
Okay, All right, so, and the vehicle being plugged in, was somebody living in it, or was somebody just charging the battery system?
I didn't get any answer when I knocked on it. It was just plugged in.
Okay, all right, next slide, Paul.
This is another one that was plugged in. No one answered when I went out, but it was plugged in and stored in the public right away.
Okay, and again, could be addressed through the vehicle code for being parked 72 hours in excess of 72 hours.
So we do address it. We work with our parking enforcement, and her and I work hand in hand. And when something like this is addressed, she'll do her part, then they'll put it in the driveway, and then I'll address my part, and then they just put it back in the street. So it's kind of a game that we're
I get you.
going with.
Yeah, it is frustrating, no doubt, which is again why we need to do something. Next slide, Paul, please. The sidewinder.
We just wanted that one to make sure it showed.
Yeah. So, does that vehicle have current registration on it?
It did.
Okay.
It was plugged in.
Okay.
Someone was living in it.
Okay.
It was parked on non-paved, so there were
Okay.
several violations at this property. But then that RV actually went to a surrounding house a few blocks around in their driveway. So when we addressed it here, it just got moved to another property. So this is one that we've got calls on why we are allowing the quote-unquote this junk to be in the front yard. And that was a hard one for me to address. But they were living in it, so it was just being moved.
I get you. And so we don't want to be the good housekeeping police. I absolutely agree with that. I would say that you could address it through the unimproved surface, unpaved, unimproved surface. So there's another code in planning that would allow for you to address it regardless of.
Yeah, non-paved,
Right.
habitable.
Right.
Definitely.
Right. Next slide, Paul.
This is one that we used for an example that not the proper cover.
Okay, but we don't have code right now that requires cover on it, right?
No, it was just
Okay.
something that we brought up if it
got
would
you.
be something that we'd request.
Yeah, I get you. Next slide, Paul.
And this is just an example of a coverage.
Right.
However, I have received several calls on this that people can't see when they're driving out of this area.
So that could be a problem. Absolutely, again, so I understand that, and that's a big guy there. So, all right, next slide, Paul. I think that's it, right?
Yes.
All right, so thanks. I didn't mean to unfairly stress you. I for one, for the mayor and the rest of the council, I'm going to support a change of the existing ordinance and recommend that any current or pending enforcement of this ordinance be stayed pending adoption of an amended or new ordinance. And for the city manager, I thought at the last council meeting 2 weeks ago that we had a consensus that that's what we were going to do until this meeting occurred. But I heard somebody in the audience speak about how that didn't happen. And maybe I'm mistaken, but I think when the council speaks, I would appreciate it when people listen. And so I don't know where the confusion was. Maybe I'm confused, and I'll own that too.
I will let the city attorney address that one.
So if there's going to be action by council during a comment period, it really should be agendized so that the public has ample opportunity to also comment. So to actually make a decision and have it be enforceable, it should be an agendized item.
Okay, so thank you for the clarification. I would just say it would have been helpful to have received that at the last council meeting, because I think maybe we sent out a bad message and maybe gave some people some false expectations. So that concludes my initial comments, Mayor. And so from my perspective, I think the thing that I would like to see would be if there's a will, a consensus or a majority of the council wants to change the ordinance, then I think we need to look at the elements that the chief has proposed, because the majority of those I can support. There are a couple I have questions about, but I, for one, think that this ordinance is old, is antiquated, it needs to be changed, and I think this is going to be just the first domino of other things. I think Councilmember Perez hit on it. At the last council meeting, I also brought up cars and driveways, because non-ops can be a whole separate conversation. and I know that we can only take this one bite at a time. Chief, I appreciate your work and your staff's work on this. I couldn't agree more with eliminating that 14-day part of it. I do not support in any way, shape, or form a permit process for this, and ultimately, I also would like to see this removed from council for public hearings in the future. But I just don't think it's the right place for it. I think it should be depoliticized, not put on council's agenda. So with that, Mayor, I'll be quiet for the here and the now. Thank you, sir.
Right, Chief?
If I can add, yes, I didn't get to that point of the staff report, but we have asked city attorney to look into changing also 10.40.100 public hearing to change that to a hearing officer instead of a city council. That is under advisement through, they're working on that change for it. So where we're at with all of this is basically this is a report to you to make a decision on it, whether you're gonna allow vehicles to be parked in the driveway or not. If allowed, which of those restrictions you would like to address, and the permit program, whether you would like to address that permit program. And I may add, if you do allow vehicles to be parked on the driveway, those vehicles meeting those restrictions wouldn't need a permit. So since if they're allowed by this council, then they wouldn't need a permit. It would be for larger vehicles that don't fit the restrictions that you decide to put on.
Okay, Councilmember Resendez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So after hearing that passionate report from Councilmember Burns, I obviously I don't think we can take any action tonight, but what I would suggest is that we have an ad hoc committee with anybody who's interested in meeting with the police department and ironing out some of these details, and then further putting that on agenda to bring back to the council for consideration of adoption. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. I guess I will give my comments on this because I've had the adventure of going through this for so many different years, and the disappointments when we lifted the restrictions, disappointment of the changes that were never done and they were promised to us, and that was not you, Chief, that was before, and was a lot of promises over and over that they had a great new plan that was going to solve everything, and then nothing happened. We're like, where's the plan? Turns out there never was one worked on, so that was extremely frustrating. So I appreciate it. But I have been involved in these conversations both before and after, and I can tell you I think, Chief, you made the comment for now you have a few angry people. The other way, you had a lot of angry people. Once we lifted and a bunch of new RVs came in and trucks and you name it, it came, and it was just a flood of phone calls and angry residents. And it's a shame because you have those that do maintain and do it right. But unfortunately, you have so many that don't. And I can remember some of them passionately in here going on and on about how it's just not fair, and we're just, we care about our RVs and we're not going to use it for anything else. And then getting the complaint of, hey, there's people living in those RVs, and really going to the home and say, hey, I remember you at the council meeting saying you weren't going to do this. Well, it's just because it's our cousin, so it's okay. And then moving it down the street to meet the rules, and then moving it again, and then getting others complaining. And it just became one crazy game of people. So I think, and I agree with you, Mr. Burns, on there's ways, there's got to be a way to do this, but first steps is giving code enforcement and the police department really change some of the rules as far as not allowing people just to move it and to say, okay, you move it, and then we'll come back in 72 hours and we'll play this game again. And this is where the waste of time comes. And it's the same thing for the cars parked on the lawn. I've said this for years and could never get the support needed at the time to change that. And if that car is just parked on the lawn, or that RV or anything else, it should be cited right then and there. It shouldn't be a question asked. It shouldn't be about, we're going to give you so many days to move it and we're going to come back to play this game again, because that's what it became. So, and I think it's unfair to those that are doing it right, keeping their RVs in good condition. And this becomes a problem because eventually you get the one, as in the picture, where it's not. But I have to say that it's rare when you see ones that look that bad. So I think for this council, there's ways to do this. But I don't think, I would say an ad hoc is really not the way to do this. It's going to take the entire council's input and a good conversation from the public to really work out something that's fair long-term. And it's not going to become a issue for the police department or code enforcement to have to enforce and go around. And it's not fair that one person goes around and reports 30 vehicles because they're angry about something else. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you're being made to do something, you're probably pretty angry and you want to make sure everybody else is following that same rule. So, you know, again, the biggest disappointment was that change in the rules that was promised that can change our world never happened and let this entire council down. But I know there's communities that are doing this right, and I would recommend taking the time to find those that seem to have it done right. But as I mentioned, those other issues of parking for 72 hours and not allow it to just move one spot over makes it okay. It doesn't. The other big thing that I kept hearing about this over and over was, yeah, they're keeping it in their driveway, but now all their cars are in our parking spots. That was the other major issue. So I think that has to be addressed. But again, I think there are ways to do it. And I don't know if any work ever really was done, as was mentioned in the last effort, but I think it has to be done fair, done right. I don't know if suspending the rules right now is the right choice. I think that serious effort of really spending some time here at the council with the public, both those that are for it and are against it, and really sit down and hammer it out. And I can remember I thought we were really close to it. So I was, again, disappointed that it never came back in the right way. But to just think it's going to go away by allowing it is not. It was, as I said, it was pretty interesting to see how quickly that turned bad on us. And so, in other words, I'm wishing you the best of luck. Mr. President, did you have something? I thought I saw something.
I think this is going to be a longer conversation with all the multiple choices we have here. I'm willing to hammer it out tonight, actually, but
yeah, it's not agendized for that, but
yeah, but
Well, I will say staff is looking for direction, so I mean, if they're gonna rewrite an ordinance, they need some.
yeah. So I'm looking at I kind of like the permitting process, and I kind of don't, because it's like, what do you do when my cousin from Bakersfield comes over and parks in front of my neighbor's house? He's got 72 hours, right? Or does he have to 72 hours to park there, and then he goes and gets a permit, and then he can park 72 hours there?
One of the conditions was the RV has to be registered to that house.
Oh, okay. I didn't
So
see that.
your neighbor needs to find another place, or your cousin needs to find another place to visit.
I don't even want him to come.
Okay, I'll have a talk with him.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
The whole idea around the permit was, so if we did get a complaint about somebody, they're storing their RV at their house, they could sit there and say, we can go there and say, oh, I got a permit, we could close out the call.
Well, and on the other side, it's like, okay, it takes me like 4 or 5 days to get my rig ready. Of course, I have a jet ski on my lawn, but I won't. But you know what? I'll just keep my jet skis in the back until it's time to go. But it's like the I know. I thought I was going to be on there. I'm kind of disappointed.
Mr. Mayor.
But I like it because it kind of records the time that we have there, but it kind of limits the time we have there, because sometimes I take off 3 or 4 times in 2 months. I'll go out every weekend, and I don't know, so it's got its advantages and disadvantages. I just, you know what, I'm glad that, you know, we're looking at this finally, because I've been bringing this up, that we need to bring this up, and we need to get in front of this instead of waiting till we get this, or worse, you know. So I don't know about being able to freeze, suspend, or all these things, but I know that this is an issue we need to address as soon as possible. As far as direction, I think one unit vessel per property, as long as it's not a blight or obstructing views. The other thing I was kind of concerned about is the height. You know, it's like, I don't know how tall my trailer is, my RV. I know I go underneath the over ramps, that's about it. So I don't know how, I've never checked the height of my RV, so I don't know how that works. But that's all I have.
Do you have a comment, Ms. Morales?
Yeah, so in terms of direction, so you heard from kind of in terms of public comment, both sides, from the owners, the challenges, the limitations. We also heard from Carlson in terms of from a public safety perspective. You know, I don't know if you said he was one of the ones that went around, but so you heard, I'm looking for policy that addresses both sides, from not only the vehicle owners, but also from the concerned citizens that it impacts. And while I appreciate, you know, the fact that you're putting policy that helps you alleviate your workload, I'm looking at it more from a user end perspective. And whether, you know, somebody calls and says, oh, they do have a permit, it should be more towards, like, how does this impact our residents? How does the balance between telling people how to live their lives versus making sure that we are ensuring, beautifying our neighborhood and ensuring you know, people's safety. That's the balance that I'm looking for. Not from like our perspective and what benefits us, but more or less that's how we should be serving our community. In terms of specific direction, bullet number 6, unless you have clear description on how engineering is going to be involved, I'm not interested in that. I think it needs to be higher than 10 feet. We heard today that if whatever the norms are, 10 is not it. So if it's 12 or 13, not sure what that is. I'm not an expert, I don't have an RV. That needs to be reflective of what's now more of an average height. I'm in favor of one vehicle, as long as it's not negatively impacting their neighbors or public safety. More of a balanced approach. I'm not interested in the permit. I'm not interested in restricting or telling people how to live their lives. And I do think that we could probably, you know, even send out a survey for people that have complained, and people, it sounds like you have a very comprehensive list. Send out a survey. Here's what we're proposing. Give us your thoughts. You have, you know, 5 business days, and let us know what they think. It's really challenging to have people like look at the agenda, come here. You're going to get a super small percentage of the population that reaches out to city council or comes here and talks to the council about this particular issue. If you have that level of interest from the public in terms of just complaints, and it looks like we've been dealing with this for a very long time, a survey will take minimal effort and we'll probably get a lot more insight.
Mr. Resendez and then Mr. Burns.
I was just going to circle back to my idea. I think we need to appoint a couple of members from the council, and I'd love to suggest appointing Councilmember Burns, Councilmember Perez to an ad hoc, ironing out all these details with our staff, and then coming back to us with a policy. And then at that time, we can continue on the conversation.
Mr. Burns?
You know, I could absolutely join in on that. I would be okay with that. However, I would say I think that staff did an excellent job. I'm looking at page 98 in the council packet, and there are like 10 items, and I think I don't know that it requires that. And you know, I also think that if we're going to do the ad hoc committee or anything else, I'm going to recommend, and for the city attorney, I think I'm on point now that I could recommend that we stay any enforcement action until we figure this thing out. Is that, am I on point?
So But you're still wanting action tonight, correct? I mean, you can make a recommendation and we can bring it back as an agenda item to stay enforcement and get public input regarding stay of enforcement, but.
Okay, all right, so I guess that's what I would say, but I still think we can give some clear direction to staff, so that they're not waiting to do some of the work. And I like what Councilmember Morales said about more community engagement. Again, I couldn't agree more with you. You know, on a packed night here, we have 50 to maybe 60 people in here. And this will impact hundreds of people and potentially could impact thousands of people, because there may be some neighbors that don't like it. I mean, I've owned a house in Hollister for about 25 years now. For about 17, 18 of those, I have a neighbor that had one of those big RVs legally parked on their side yard, would meet all these requirements. But we also know with the new development that's going on, you're not, I guarantee you, even in my house, I can't get an RV down the side or into the back. You see in some new development where they're actually putting a garage door. I know some of the homes off of Buena Vista out in that area that are probably 15, 20 years old now, had a door where you could actually go in the garage door, take a boat, an RV, a car into the backyard. But a lot of this, you know, they're big houses on small lots. And so I don't know that a lot of this is going to be practical, but I would like to give staff some direction on where to invest their time moving forward. And I would like to recommend that we bring this back at the next council meeting, because I think it's important. If we're going to change this, first of all, I don't think staff should be spending a lot of unnecessary time on this until we give them clear direction on what it is we want, based on what the community says. And so I'm set to roll. I have page 98 up. I can go there if council wants to. If not, Councilmember Morales just pretty much rolled through it. And so I think it would be helpful. The good news is it's just 9 o'clock. I mean, this is really an abnormal meeting for us. Normally, we just don't have the time to go with this, but I think no time like the present to give staff the direction they've asked for in this case. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor, the chief, I think, would like to go through the list and get consensus on each bullet point if council will accept that.
Well, the whole goal is to get some direction. We can start working on this. Our intent was to get direction so that we can come back to council with your recommendations in a formal revision of the ordinance. So if we went down that road, would there be consensus to change the ordinance to reflect, to allow under certain conditions, a trailer to be parked in a driveway? Is that a direction you want us to go through at this point?
I would say absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if that's the case, the conditions that we have here, only allowed if the RV does not already fit in the rear or side yard per the current code. Would that be something you would want in there? Yes, consensus. The RV should have fitted or well-maintained cover to eliminate the visual clutter, no tarps or other makeshift devices. Is that something that you would want on there to be reflected?
So you're saying that we have to cover our vehicles?
It would be a cover specifically for the RV. So,
but if you don't put a tarp on it, do you have to still put a cover on it?
well, the suggestion is to have a nice, like one of the examples was there, a nice cover so it doesn't eliminates a little bit of the blight and your neighbors aren't complaining. But that's just a suggestion. You don't have to agree to that condition at all.
But to clarify that, yes, we'd want to cover over it. Just like whenever we address the unmarked cars or unused cars, when we get to that one, we'd probably suggest the same thing.
Okay.
This would be less people habitable living in them.
And I value your input too, because I'm not trying to make your job harder. You guys probably have one of the hardest jobs.
Well,
but I'm hoping that this is going to give you a tool to make your job that much easier.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and understand, and I hope the public understands. You know, me and Desiree, our goal is to work with our community. It's not to just sit there and issue them a citation and everything like that. That's the reason why, as Desiree broke it down, you get up to 6 weeks to correct the violation. That's on any violation. So we give the community ample amount of time to find a solution for whatever problem we're addressing, whether it's junk in your yard or, overgrown landscaping or what have you. So,
I don't know if we've received consensus on an RV cover on there or not. Yes, okay. The current setbacks for fire prevention are actually 5 feet from adjoining property, 5 feet from an inhabited structure, including a garage. Is that something that the council would want reflected in the condition? 5 feet away from the home.
I'm looking at revisiting the current setbacks, so I don't know.
So this is 3.
I know. I'm sorry. After the writing of this, Chief Delcampo advised it's 5 feet, not 3 feet away from the structure. That's his recommendation. If you want to say 3 feet, I mean, it's whatever the council desires. His recommendation was 5 feet.
I would be good with 3 feet, and I don't necessarily understand the rationale to an attached garage. Now, if it was a converted garage where there's human habitation, maybe, but I can go one way or another on the garage, but I think 3 is adequate. And I've not heard anything to really support that, and unfortunately, the fire department's not here, and if they believe strongly in it, when you guys come back, they can come back and speak passionately to that, Chief.
Okay. We have consensus on 3 feet.
If I can add something
Sure.
there, it should be clear, are you talking about the overhang?
Yeah.
Or the door? And most fire departments want at least a minimum of 4-foot clearance to run through areas because they have gear on. That's why 3 feet is usually, used to be 3 foot was all right. Now it's minimum is always 4 foot by code on most.
Yeah.
It's
most things.
36 inches for a gurney. Is requirement for all emergency exits is 36 inches.
Yeah, but to get around just items like this is what I'm saying, just so everybody's clear. But the overhang is the question. You're talking about the overhang, you're talking about the door. You should just be clear. So whatever is decided here, you don't have that problem happen later.
Okay, so can we move forward on 3 feet and then get a clarification by the fire chief when he's here from when this comes to the council again? Is that okay? He is? Is he available?
Charlie, they're calling you.
You're on the spot, Charlie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Yes. What was the question? I was listening to the setbacks. We were looking in the fire code and we couldn't find anything that states anything on the fire code. We usually just do the recommendations. So I didn't see anything. And I think the 3 foot would be fine. Because he was asking me that and I was looking at all the code books, the fire code and the building code and the residential code. And I couldn't find anything that states that setback for the storage. And then the only thing I did find on storage was in back behind screened fences. So I'm okay with what you guys decide on that stuff right there.
So just again, clarity on the overhang or door. Does it matter to you?
I'm okay with what you guys say. I couldn't find anything. I was trying to find all the justification to figure it out because I'm about justifying it with the code, and I couldn't find any fire code that would recommend that. So, I mean, people park their cars all the way up against their garages. I know RVs are a lot bigger, but as long as they're out of the public right away and they meet all the other conditions, if that's what they want to take a chance and do, then that's up to them and what you guys decide on that part. But we're pretty flexible on this.
So I'm hearing something else here in the way of you're not even asking for 3 foot, as long as they're out of the sidewalk. So just again, so council's clear on this and you don't have issues coming forward. So that would be council saying, we don't need 3 feet. The fire department is not asking for it. But you're saying.
Well, the chief had recommended 5, and I get it. He's trying to be overprotective on that, but 5 is kind of hard on residentials. I get that part too. So I think we can come with a compromise.
3 foot. 3 foot then.
Okay.
Mayor, I liked your clarification, though. I would say 3 feet from the garage door as opposed to the overhang.
I'd agree
That
with
would
you.
that would be my recommendation,
Okay.
Chief.
Duly noted. The RV must be parked perpendicular to the driveway entrance, no horizontal or angled parking in the driveway. Is that consensus? Limited to only 1 RV per residence. That means 1 recreational vehicle, 1 boat, 1 trailer. Just 1.
What's your address?
Wait, Chief, please
Yes.
clarify that. You're saying you're allowed to have one boat, one RV, one trailer, or
They're-
just one of any one of those?
Not one of each. It's
One
one. It's,
total.
they're all considered recreational vehicles, whether it's an RV, motorhome, or a boat, or jet skis, or any kind of utility trailer. You're only allowed one of those per residence, per driveway. Okay. The RV has to be on a pad approved by engineering, cement, pavers, not dirt or grass. And the reason for that is you need the stability for the trailer, and you also need to know whether you've already exceeded the limit on paving or cement on your property. A compromise might be pavers that still allow the rainwater to go down, but offer a stable foundation for the recreational vehicle. They would be the ones that would decide whether you have exceeded or not whether you could put cement or you could put pavers on there, depending on the drainage and the property line.
There's in the city of Hollister, we don't require a permit for flat work, right?
It has to be approved by engineering. if they do.
Approved, but it's not like you got to pull a building permit to lay a cement pad.
Correct. You don't, you're correct on that part, but if you are, like, if you move in, you have a driveway and you want to add more cement work, it's
Right.
probably not approved because of the Water Control Board.
Right.
Because it has to be drained. But you can say pavers or things like that, which engineering will approve what kind of material you're using.
Okay.
The RV cannot be higher than 10 feet. This is flexible. I don't think that the consensus of the council is 10 feet. Would you like it to be 11, 12 feet?
I think it's currently 12. Currently, it's 12, correct?
12 feet on the side storage. So if you want to keep it the same, then it would be 12 feet.
I Googled real quick that it's, most of them are between 10 and 11 feet. There is the rare incidences, but then you have the bigger buses.
You're talking about height.
Height,
Yes,
correct.
yes.
You're
in
talking
height.
about side.
No, height.
Height.
How high you can go. No, this is just how tall they are.
Right, we saw a couple pictures of them in driveways.
Yeah.
How did we arrive at that number? Was that just arbitrary? Did we do research on that?
The number for the height?
The
Yes.
height.
So we,
Talking about the boat or the RVs, I mean, because I just don't know how we came to that number.
so we came to the number, we went and did a research on what an average size of a standard RV for the length and the height was, and that's the number we came up with. It doesn't include the, what is it, the AC unit?
The
Oh,
AC
yeah.
unit, no. It's the main unit.
So if that's an additional feet or so, that's obviously,
And is that on a trailer for the boats, or are we talking 12 feet for the boat plus whatever the trailer? And again, I don't know what the answer to this is, but I guarantee you there'll be questions at some point when it comes to trying to enforce on some of these things. And so better to know in advance, in my mind.
I think the code, DMV code for trailers is trucks no higher than 13 foot without special permits. Is that,
Yes.
that sound correct, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where you're getting the 12 foot, because most, I think RVs are about 10 to 11 foot.
10 feet.
And in taking consideration the air conditioning units that go up on top or
Right.
sometimes storage.
Right, so realistically, you're looking at 11 foot easily.
So just keep
maybe
it at 12?
12 is
12.
probably realistic.
Okay.
My only concern is with, when it comes to a boat, the tower, the racks where people put their speakers and stuff, those are usually pretty tall, pretty high up there. And so it's like, so would that 12-foot include the top of the speaker or the top of the boat?
it's the boat in general from the ground to the height of the boat. So if the speakers are put at another 2 feet, then he's in violation.
Yeah, you can tell your cousin to bring the speakers down.
He sunk his boat.
Okay.
We're now starting to go over height of standard properties, and that comes to the boats that are higher than the structures. If that's why we went with the standard, so it wasn't higher than a structure.
RV has to have current registration to the current resident or registered to that property. That That eliminates people's
Operable
storage.
and operable?
Yes, I think that's the next one. The RV should be working order, operable, not dismantled or wrecked in any way. Has to be something that you're not just leaving there forever, not even using. And I think that falls along with their consistently have been providing people with plenty of time to address those issues, if it's, especially if it's just temporary. I think that's something that they're already doing. And the last one is RV should be stored only in the closed position, no slide outs open, and not inhabited at any time with the exception of actively cleaning, repairing, or loading or unloading.
Yes.
Okay. Those are all the conditions that were in the recommendations. I don't know if you have any additional ones that you would like to add.
The
And-
length. We need the length,
Well, it can't exceed the sidewalk.
the public right away.
And it has to be 3 feet away from the driveway. So there are some homes that have longer driveways. They could put a longer vehicle there, but most driveways are pretty small. There's some long driveways though, or certain areas.
Can I recommend, I think we should stick with a length, because then you're going back into blocking views if you have those longer driveways. Like that one on that house that had the longer driveway. And if that vehicle came out, he couldn't see because of the extension of that RV size. When you have the longer driveways, you're looking at those bigger RVs, those 28 footers versus a 24, 26.
Couldn't you address that though through a sightline obstruction? I think there's other ways to deal with it. To keep, I think the simpler we keep this, the better for everybody, from enforcement as well as from homeowners.
I hear what you're saying about the other options, but the most people don't look at it like that. So we have somebody parking on their lawn, we issue them a cite for having their RV on their lawn or something like that. And the person that's meeting all these requirements, you know, that person that got cited is gonna look at well, what about that person? You know, that's, so, yes, there's many actions we can do, but not, and the person getting the ticket or getting the warning, I mean, most of our complaints are stemming from other warnings. They're looking at, well, what about them? What about them? You know, so.
I think that's the point he's making though, is if it's fitting in the driveway, 3 foot from the garage door, it's not overhanging the sidewalk, it meets the rules.
Sure.
Because then, otherwise you're talking about, is it 24 foot and a half? It's, you know, you're getting into nitpicking. And the point I think Mr. Burns is making.
Right. Well,
Yes.
and you'll see this all the time in landscaping, shrubs, hedges, all the time. You'll see it in fences where fences are extended out to the curb, or not to the curb, but to the sidewalk.
Right.
And they haven't stepped down. And in planning, there are codes that require you to step it down so that it doesn't create an obstruction for your neighbor trying to back out. And so I think there are a lot of ways to do it. And from my life experience, the simpler this is, it's like, quite candidly, when I went to work for the city of Visalia, I was tasked with rewriting the public nuisance ordinance for the city of Visalia. And having come from Hollister, it was like, well, somewhere there's got to be an ordinance that says you can't park on your front lawn, because when the way you get there, it doesn't say that. And so, number one, it's hard to interpret it yourself as the enforcer and then try to explain, well, it's not that it says you can't park on your front lawn, it says that you can't park on a non-improved surface. And ding, the light goes on, but I think you keep it as basic as possible. And then I think when it's all said and done, you do a mass media blitz, whether it be putting notices out in our water bills, whatever we need to do so that everybody gets it. Because in the past, we've seen sheds that were sold to people in place where they were not allowed. Ignorance is bliss, but it really isn't. And, you know, to rely on the sellers of RVs, trailers, boats to do that, they're never going to do that because it's not in their best interest. So we need to do a better job. And candidly, because we're here tonight, we've already done a really good job with this new version, because this thing got parked for, like, as I heard you guys say, like 5 years. And so we're 100% better tonight than we were before. So just my recommendation, keep it simple. I think it just works better for everybody.
And the final thing that I would need, see if there's consensus on, is changing the 14-day to a permit process, and we can make that permit process as much as you want. Suggestion was 4 permits a year free, and after that, a fee to be determined. You could make it more than that. You can make it 6, 7 permits that are free, but you just have to go. We're hoping that with the new program that the IT is working on, that those permits can even get online, but they have to be specific to the address and the RV, so that we don't have people constantly having their RVs parked in a manner that they otherwise wouldn't. However, if you do allow these RVs, and their RVs are allowed under the code, the new code, to be parked there, they wouldn't need a permit because they're just there already.
Go ahead, sir.
That's what I was going to say. If we're going to allow this, then we don't need the permit process, I think.
We would need that would be for a bigger trailer that doesn't usually fit, that they're just getting a 72-hour to load and unload and allow that.
Or what about parked on the street?
The permit would allow them to park on the street under the situation where it's not blocking traffic and or the visual of it, of the drivers.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
So my suggestion would be, it sounds like we're going in a whole different direction. My suggestion would be, let's just try this and let's adopt it. And then if we see that that's an issue or it's becoming a problem, then we can revisit the permit process. But it doesn't sound like two things, that it's needed. And I don't know if there's consensus from what I heard of the conversations about giving a permit process in general. So that would be my suggestion.
I do like the part though where we are keeping some kind of track of it without causing too much work. But I think Paul was coming about pulling out the app next year sometime, beginning of next year. So maybe if we stall on this and bring it back when the app is up and running. Go ahead.
I think we have two issues here. If we come back with a proposal ordinance that will address certain people will be allowed to park if they meet the requirements on their driveway, the permit process still is to address the people whose vehicles do not fit in their driveways. And they still want to bring them in and load them and unload them and do all that stuff for their trips. And to be allowed to be parked on the street, because they're not supposed to be parked on the street at all. And if they had a permit and allows us a way to track it, we can, when we get those phone calls from the neighbors, we can address it that way, that this person has an authorized permit to load and unload their vehicle for 72 hours, so it's not actually a violation.
But in all actuality, they have 72 hours anyways, right?
Actually, they don't.
Not in the public right away.
No, if they're parked on the street, they can be cited right away.
So if I park my RV in front of my house, you guys can give me a ticket?
Yeah.
After 72 hours, yes.
After 72 hours?
No,
To live.
the section does not give any time to the city ordinance. So the city ordinance 10.220, 10.0220 says no RVs be parked in the public right of way at all, unless you're actively loading and unloading.
Mr. Burns?
I think we just leave this alone, personally, and let the code speak for itself on that. If we have an existing code, I think the more complicated we make it, other people will see, and then people see, people do, and I just think you enforce on that. My sense is I've not heard a whole lot of pushback from enforcing on the streets. It hasn't gotten to my level, and I've got plenty of pushback on private property parking. And so I think if we already have an enforcement tool, and I don't know. I tend to agree with Councilmember Resendez that we don't, I don't believe we have an issue with that at this point, and I could be 100% wrong or ignorant on that.
But just really quick, Mr. Mayor, section 10.10.020, public right-of-way parking and storage of recreational vehicles prohibited. No person shall abandon, park, store, leave, keep, or maintain, or permit to be abandoned, parked, stored, left, kept or maintain any recreational vehicle or boat upon any public right-of-way. No habitation or occupancy of the recreational vehicle or boat shall be allowed at any time that the recreational vehicle or boat is located on public right-of-way, except when the person is actively loading or unloading the recreational vehicle or boat. That's the end of the ordinance. So that says that any boat or motorhome that's parked on the street and it's not actively being loaded or unloading is in violation of our ordinance. And that's another reason why we would want that permit, so that that person that is going in there and loading and unloading, but sometimes that takes more than a day. And maybe they're not, when the police show up, they're not actively loading, but they're gonna finish loading up in the morning. A permit process would allow us to give them the time that they need to fully load their vehicle and get going on their trip.
There's one more important part to this. That is, there are people that look to park in neighborhoods with their vehicles that do not live in there. And they know the rule of 72 hours. So if now currently you have to have that permit, you can't just park an RV somewhere. You have to have that permit, and that's why that is part of that, because you will have people park without getting permission, park for 72 hours and then move to the next place. And we've had those calls many of times.
And for the 72 hours, for what I directed our parking enforcement officer to start doing is issuing the admin cites directly for that section that the chief did or just mentioned. So that's an immediate violation. We're not giving them the 14 days or anything like that.
Right, but without that rule is what I'm saying. Then they could park wherever they want for 72 hours.
Correct.
And create that problem. Go ahead, Mr. Burtz.
So Chief, with your explanation for that, I'm gonna flip-flop and support that. But I think it would be better housed not in the part on private property, but in addition to the ordinance you just read as the exceptions, or to enhance I didn't catch the code section, and both my pens quit writing. I'm claiming conspiracy, but I think it would be better placed in that part of the ordinance to not confuse the private property issues. Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate it. I'll use it well.
I think that we may have people whose RVs do not fit in with the conditions in their driveway, and the permit addresses that as well, that they could bring it in for 72 hours while they're loading and unloading, with the exception of not covering or not blocking the sidewalk. Maybe they could be a little closer if we're only talking 1 or 2 days, 3 days at the most.
My only concern is, again, I don't want to see these things, whether it be the RV, whether it be a trailer or a boat. I absolutely don't want to see necks of RVs or boats extending into the sidewalk or beyond and into the roadway.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'll trust staff and to write it so that it's enforceable and easily interpreted for our members of our community.
That'll be our goal. It seems to be our goal is to make it a compromise, and to allow people who have their trailers and their boats to be able to load them and go off on their trips and come back and unload them. And when we do get those calls from the neighbors complaining, we can advise them they actually have a permit, however the council decides, whether you want it to be you want it to be always free, just to document so we can keep track, or is there a fee associated with it after a certain amount so that we can reimburse the cost of maintaining the permit process? That's the decision for the council.
Mr. Resendez?
Thank you. So it looks like we can go either way. For me, like, we can not do the permit and then come back and revisit it and then decide we're going to do the permit, or we can do the permit and then revisit that in a while and see how many permits we've issued. I would say it sounds like staff really wants to do the permit and move forward with that. So I definitely support that, because I think we can go either way. And then my suggestion would be not to incentivize these citizens that are doing the right thing and they're going through the permit process. We shouldn't charge them. I think we should just allow it to be free, and maybe put I guess we could put a number of cap, or not even. Let's just get the permit process out there. Let's get people used to using it. Let's not charge them. Let's see if we're using it or not, and then let's come back and revisit it, I would say.
Okay, is that the consensus? No fee. Is there a limit to how many? Can they be there every weekend, Well,
then we would know there's a problem.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
do
think
we
we'd
wanna
have to
put a
revisit
monthly?
it, but
Do you
let's
wanna
look at
put a
some
monthly?
data first, you know? I don't think we should limit them. If we're gonna go this route, then let's just go this route, you know? That's my opinion.
Is that the consensus? Is that no limits on how many permits that they can pull?
No, the reality is somebody doing it every weekend is some insanity going on there. They're probably not gonna be there very long. Their wife is gonna be frustrated after a while.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, until we really have a sense for what this is gonna be, because again, if your staff is doing 2,000 of these a year, at some point, we probably will have to assess a fee with it because it's a cost of doing business. But
Okay.
until we really know, I mean, this is brand new.
Let's get some data. Let's get some.
That would be my recommendation, Chief.
Maybe, I think we have direction. We can come back to the council with a proposed ordinance to see if that's what you want to do. And then maybe we can agree to look back at it 6 months later to see if anything, how it's working at that point, if there needs any changes.
If you're gonna do that, instead of 6 months, you have to come in a year because you need a full cycle of summertime.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And we can do that a
Yeah,
year.
but I mean, bringing it back's a good idea to refine it and see how we can better serve our people, you know?
Okay.
How I can put my jet ski on my lawn.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get the first permit, Rick?
I'm in line right now.
Okay, is that it?
Won't be parking on my grass anymore.
Thank you. All right, you got your direction.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move now to item H1. Any information on H1 tonight?
This is just the outstanding list, and if the council has questions on it.
Okay. Any questions? No? We'll then move to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And that thing was
Recording stopped.
maybe choke.